Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, our leaders in higher education and industry. What a joy it is to have you all with us at this very, very seminal event. Friends, I want to welcome you to this special hybrid webinar on micro-credentials within the short learning program space. We are grateful that you didn't shut down your laptops, close up for the year, and say, done with 2022, but instead, your zeal and enthusiasm for learning more, for networking, so that we together can embark on the process of changing the higher education sector and how we avail knowledge and knowledge products within the sector. I'm so grateful that you are here to join us as we explore contemporary approaches. And the approach that we're going to be exploring today is an approach to teaching and learning that has totally disrupted business as usual. This is an approach that has become a game changer. And so I'm glad that you took time off your schedules before you went off on your Christmas vacations to be with us today. You know, at UNISA, our UNISA Center for Lifelong Learning is situated within the Department of the Academic Planner, led by Professor Humphrey Mohashwa. And the UNISA Center for Lifelong Learning has prepared for us today a very significant program. This program is actually something worth spending the time on because it will set you apart and set you ahead. So once more, give yourselves a round of applause for setting up the time to join us today. Now, as we go through today's program, we will explore how micro-credentials challenge the orthodoxies of teaching and learning praxis and provide the much-needed flexibility for those who wish to enhance their skills and knowledge in diverse areas. Friends, you know, through its innovations in open, distance, and e-learning, UNISA has committed to seizing strategic opportunities presented by ICTs and education technologies, offering you just-in-time and just enough learning opportunities for the benefit of government, business, civil society, and communities of shared practice. With high intention and skillful practice, UNISA possesses the impetus and the impulse to drive cutting-edge practice in higher education that would support the realization of the development goals of our country and our continent through the enhanced access to critical knowledge products within the university. Now, through our innovative leadership, UNISA ensures that we have in place the strategy, the high-quality management, the systems and structures, and the zeal for the much-needed support for the education aspirations of hundreds and thousands of our students located within South Africa, on the continent, and around the world. And now, it is my supreme joy to welcome our Acting Executive Dean, Professor Zerish Zetu Nkosi. Let me tell you more about Professor Nkosi. She heads UNISA's College of Human Sciences. This is a college with over 55,000 students. Now, some whole universities don't even have the student count. Such is the enormity of Prof. Nkosi's task. This college has 19 departments and 3 schools. Over to you, Prof. Nkosi, to officially open this program and welcome us.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Program Director, for the warm welcome. Colleagues, I'm here on behalf of our Principal and Vice Chancellor, Prof. Lenkabula, because she's held in another meeting. It means I'm wearing big shoes. Wherever she goes, she always mentions her 10 catalytic niche areas, which is something that I need to mention before I proceed with the opening and the welcome. As the University of South Africa, we are not binding ourselves to these 10 catalytic niche areas, but this is the footprint that we need to do as the university, the largest university of the land. It's energy, it's marine studies, it's student support, it's co-curricular studies, it's digitization, it's Busadi women and theorization, it's aviation, it's health, medicine, biotechnology, just to mention the few. Because I'm standing at academic planner, I just want to make sure that I get my IPMS correct, because if I don't mention her 10 catalytic niche areas, I'm in trouble. So ladies and gentlemen, this is UNISA Center for Lifelong Learning. Mr. Kekane will come and explain to you on the UNISA Center for Lifelong Learning. We are here to really improve on our offerings. That's why we got a new term today which says micro-credentials. We want to hear more about what is happening in the field of technology when it comes to our short learning programs. As the University of South Africa, we've committed to say all colleges need to develop and implement the short learning programs in order to address the ills of our past. So we're here to make sure that we are in the correct direction on how we implement this strategic objective of our university, where we see our short learning programs as the third income stream. And then secondly, we are looking at pillar 1, where we are advancing technology, mediated quality learning and teaching. So the colleagues are going to explain to us on how we can move positively in ensuring that we are meeting this objective. When I looked into the webinar, it says opportunities presented by micro-credentials in the offering of short learning program. And you know that technology is always evolving. We need to be at par with what is happening country-wise and globally. So the colleagues are going to explain to us on how are we going to embark on these micro-credentials. With my little knowledge, I checked that these are small certification style courses that focuses on a particular area of study. We can get it in the form of a badge, points that can be added, but I don't want to spoil their presentation because they've worked so hard. I just wanted to zoom into our strategic, the APP, to say we are expected to deliver and also we are here to do it. When we look into our SDGs, there are so many, there are 17, but I went in to tie in the importance of SLPs. I look into ending poverty, because when we offer the short learning programs, we are empowering communities so that they can do some of the activities. Dr. James now is worried that Prof. Kosi is going to my CE portfolio. No, Dr. James, we are still doing our SLPs. When we look into SDG 4 on quality education, micro-credentialing will link into how we can offer quality education in terms of SLP. And then I see here our partners, and then we need to form this partnership with our communities, with the municipalities, with the organization, so that we really deliver, because we are looking for relevance and also we are looking for responsiveness to the needs of our communities. When I looked into the benefits, why now are we here? Why are we worried about this? I looked and say, okay, the technologies are allowing us to explore to wider authorities and the gates. It's develop real world skills. We are here to upskill our communities. And also we need to work with industries. When we've got a theory, then it needs to be implemented. We need the bridge between the theory and practice. That's why we're here as communities, different organizations. And also we want to do things because technology is evolving. We are looking into quicker and agile activities that will improve our deliveries as a country, as an organization, as a university. And then time is money. So everything that we do is time related. With the little research that I did, it says companies are struggling to find employees to fill the position. So SLPs, it's number one. Those that are hired, they don't have the skills to execute some of the tasks. Then what is your solution? SLP is quick, active, that needs to be done. Many people need digital skills in order to deliver on their task. And then with micro-credentialing, it's going to help us on how we achieve that goal. So when we look into our SDG 4, talking about quality education and lifelong learning, I will say, what I know for sure is that lifelong learning is important. The careers are changing with emerging technologies and industry shift, and economic factors are influencing the nature of the work. Program Director, may I openly welcome all the colleagues that are here and those that are online, and also we are opening this session and we say thank you very much to the UNISA Center for Lifelong Learning team and all those that organized this meeting. I wish you all the best as we unpack the concept and how can we improve on our delivering. We've got our guest speaker who's gonna share. Dr. Chetty, we're looking forward to your presentation, and Ms. Nell, your response, and thank you very much, Prof. Mukashwa. The meeting is opened. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof. Nkosi, for providing us with a very sound foundation for our program today. You have really hit it on the mark. Micro-credentials can indeed support our efforts in sustainable development across the country, the continent, and the world. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great joy to introduce you to our dynamic acting director of the UNISA Center for Lifelong Learning. Now, he is really a servant of the institution par excellence. He has a significant career in higher education, in diverse spaces, and wherever he is, there is such drive, such commitment, and we really, really appreciate him at UNISA. And so, today, put your hands together for Mr. Sam Kekana, our acting director. He will tell us all about the UNISA Center for Lifelong Learning. Over to you, Sam.
Thank you. I think I'm gifted as far as height is concerned. Program Director, Professor Mohashwa, Prof. Nkosi, our distinguished speakers of the day. Most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, as they say, protocol observed. Thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate your presence here. Stakeholders from outside the university, we really appreciate that you made time, to come and attend this event. This is a turning time, colleagues. This is a turning point for the UCL. We're looking forward, to create this environment wherein all of us in this room would be able to be proud of UCL and its work. Thank you very much. And some of you colleagues might have had experience with UCL, experience with short learning programs. The experience might have been positive or negative, but believe you me, we're turning the tide. We're making things different. We're making things to happen. We're making sure that we deliver on our mandate. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, UCL is a directorate in the Department of Academic Planning under the stewardship of Prof. Motsa, who is a VP, Teaching and Learning. UCL is responsible for the coordination and execution and administration of non-formal programs at UNISA, as well as determining the strategic direction of the center and its offerings. UCL colleagues consolidated 25 centers that used to reside in various colleges. You might recall that in 2017, 2018, we embarked on a process of consolidating these centers that were in different colleges. So what we have now is the central administration of UCL that is responsible for these administrative functions. Our mandate, colleagues. Our mandate is to generate the third stream income for the university by making sure that we collect revenue through students' registrations. We promote lifelong learning in making sure that beyond your normal degree, your 3-year degree, 4-year degree, you are able to learn other skills, that will empower you to be able to be competitive in life. We support students and academic colleges through the following. Student support and customer service, that's your contact center environment, wherein we deal with emails, telephones, and other forms of communications with the public. We do business-to-business initiatives. We've got colleagues here from Tshwane, wherein at some point in time, we engage in business-to-business activities with those. And many of them, indeed, that are joining online as well, like your Pick and Pays, your ShopRites, we did business with those. So that is business-to-business initiatives. Marketing and business development, we're looking forward to make sure that we reinforce this area as UCL to make sure that we're able to galvanize new business through industry engagements and making sure that we go out there to look for new business. We do applications and registrations wherein we support our new students that are coming in. We manage students, student finances and operational finances within the center by making sure that the center is healthy from a financial point of view. We also support our students with study material, then assessment and certification. So that's what we do, and that's our mandate. If we fail to deliver on this, the university is always on our case. And Prof. Mohashwa is adamant that we really need to turn around the situation in making sure that we deliver on this mandate. Our vision, colleagues, is that towards being an industry leader in SLP's provision by student numbers and revenue. So meaning that we want to grow in terms of revenue and in terms of our student numbers. Our mission, provide high quality and industry relevant relevant SLPs to students, that our SLPs should be informed by the industry as to what does the industry demands out there. How do we become responsive to the needs of our communities out there by coordinating and working together with the industry. Contribute towards building high world-class service administration through development and implementation of best practices. This is something that is in your hands, colleagues from UCL, that you really need to develop this world-class kind of service. Implement interventions to ensure compliance, effective and efficient functioning administrative and operational systems. Continuously improving our services by benchmarking with our peers, national and international. We always do that to make sure that we are as competitive as possible. Ensure that our services are aligned to the core business of the university, because we don't operate from a vacuum. We operate within the confines of the university. So we must always find alignment with our university. Prof. Nkosi touched on the very important issue here of niche areas that have been identified by the university. And ladies and gentlemen, this is an opportunity for you in terms of colleges to make sure that you focus on these niche areas that as UCL, we're going to support, right? As you can see, those niche areas, and colleagues that are in this room and those that are joining virtually, please, we are asking for your collaboration in these niche areas. Those that are in the automotive industry, UNISA is saying, here are opportunities for you to come and collaborate with the Center for Lifelong Learning. Aviation, energy, as you know that as a country, we're grappling with load shedding. Where are those creative minds that would come on board and develop a short learning program on energy management or energy solutions in this industry? Feminist, womanist, Bosadi, theorization, and these are the colleges that we should be collaborating with, ladies and gentlemen. Fourth Industrial Revolution and digitalization, health studies and medicine, Prof. Nkosi, in your college, marine studies, natural sciences, space, and square kilometer array. So colleagues, these are the university proposed niche areas that we need to focus on in terms of our short learning programs. And UCL is here to support these initiatives to ensure that we roll out these niche areas and develop new short learning programs, new micro-credentials around these niche areas. And when we spoke to the ED, we said that by June next year, we should have 1 or 2 of the micro-credentials in these niche areas. And we are committing to that, initiative that by June at least we should have 1 or 2 micro-credentialing programs on one of these niche areas. Colleagues, I'd like to acknowledge the colleagues that have supported us in the journey of running UCL. That is the college coordinators, Prof. Sigwadi from the College of Law, Dr. Muhabi from the College of Education, Prof. Kritzinger from the College of Science, Engineering and Technology, Dr. Vessels from the College of Economic and Management Sciences, Prof. Ramphal from the College of Accounting Sciences, Prof. Mwepe from CHS, that is College of Human Sciences, and Prof. Christian Ryan from the College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences. I'll be doing injustice, colleagues, if I cannot acknowledge the acting academic planner, that is Prof. Mohashwa, when he initiated this idea of this workshop, it was 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. Ladies and gentlemen, this event was organized in 2 weeks. Can we please give him a round of applause? Through his leadership, we were able to put up this event. And when he shared the idea with us, it was on a Monday, I remember. He said, colleagues, can you please work on this idea and give me feedback tomorrow morning? He was referring to Tuesday, by the way, 7 o'clock. So 7 o'clock on Tuesday, we had to present ideas on how we're going to implement this event. Can you imagine? So from that day onwards, we have every daily briefings in terms of the work that has happened, in terms of what needs to happen, who's going to be the speakers, and the logistics around that. So colleagues, Prof, thank you very much for really pushing us. And through this event, we were able to reflect, on our capabilities and our muscle to do it. And through this event, colleagues, we learned that, any other challenge that is on our way, we can be able to defeat that. And this also has made us to be aware of our strength and capabilities in terms of administrative functions that are expected to be carried out at UCL. When it comes to customer service, how we can improve on our turnaround time. And Prof has always said that don't ever postpone. Do it now. Why postpone? So, Prof, thank you very much. Colleagues, let's give him a round of applause. Last but not least, I'd like to thank the team. Colleagues, thank you very much. You have spent sleepless nights. At some point in time, you're calling me at night, 10 o'clock, saying, Mr. K, we can't do this. But you made it. And as we always say, that let's keep the momentum. Let's keep the pace. I know that we're running at 100 kilometers per hour, but it is sustainable. What I've learned, it is sustainable because you're able to do it. And I think you can do it. So when it comes to the projects that we're busy with, all the projects that have been initiated by Prof. Mohashwa, when you look at the groundbreaking SLP academic calendar, when you look at the turnaround time in terms of revitalizing our short learning programs that have been closed, those projects, when you look at the turnaround time in terms of the projects that have been initiated, for example, the ability to attract students in terms of converting our TP registrations, all those projects, our ability to really be able to look at accrediting our short learning programs, all those projects that have been initiated that are on our radar, let us push them. And we are capable of doing that because they're really going to give a new image to this UCL. So UCL team, thank you very much. Madam Program Director, I'm aware that I've taken more than I should have been, I was given. But in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I like this man. He's saying that education is not learning of facts, but training of the mind to think. On that note, thank you very much for listening. We hope that this event is going to be a success as it has started, and we're hoping to hear more from our speakers and experts in this field. Thank you very much, much appreciated. Thank you.
Good day, colleagues. Let's see. I've got a height impediment too. Program Director, Prof. Nkosi, Prof. Mohashwa, Mr. Kakana, all our esteemed guests. I would like to thank you for this opportunity that I've been given today. My name is Notulu Mubu Vugapi, and I have been given, and I'm humbled to be given this task of basically introducing our keynote speakers and our respondent. Denzel Chetty is a graduate of the University of KwaZulu-Natal. He holds an academic position in the College of Human Sciences at the University of South Africa. Since 2017, he has been seconded to lead strategic institutional projects in teaching, learning, and student support. In 2017, Chetty was seconded to the office of the then Pro-Vice Chancellor. He established the UNISA Open Learning Portal, which hosts MOOCs for public knowledge consumption and student skills development in a zero-rated portal. In 2019-2020, Chetty coordinated the DHET UCDP project of tutor development, building the digital and pedagogical competencies of e-tutors. In 2020, Chetty established the Academic Development Open Virtual Hub through a DHET University COVID-19 responsiveness grant. ADOVH is an incubator for digital innovation in teaching, learning, and student support. Through a subsequent DHET UCDP grant, Chetty heads a project to enhance student support and 4IR readiness for an ODEL environment. As part of this project, Chetty established collaborations with Microsoft in RGB gaming, where UNISA is the first higher education institution in Africa to use Minecraft for education to develop students' education, the critical 4IR digital competencies. Chetty holds various awards, including 2003 A. Bailey Fellowship, the 2011 UNISA Award for Innovation in Teaching and Learning, the 2014 Shanghai Open University African Visiting Scholar, and the 2015 UNISA Excellent Award in Teaching and Learning. Chetty has authored several accredited articles, book chapters, and a single-authored book publication, served as a guest editor for several special journal issues, and participated in several national and international conferences. It is my pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce Dr. Chetty.
Okay, very good morning, colleagues. I'm just checking everyone is still here. Morning. Thank you. Good morning to, let me acknowledge Prof. Nkosi, Prof. Makashwa, Mr. Sam Kakana, my respondent, Jessica Nell, and Program Director, Dr. James as well, and all our honorable guests, as well as those joining online. It's a critical part of the year where everyone switches off. And I'm actually surprised that we still have so many that are really engaged in academic matters as this part of the year. Normally at this part of the year, people are decorating Christmas trees, thinking of Christmas lunch. So it's quite good to actually see that we still have a sense of commitment to where we are as a country, as an institution, but above all, more specifically, of where we want to be in terms of teaching and learning in this space. So thank you. Firstly, let me start by commending Prof. Makashwa and Mr. Sam Kakana. I think the kind of position that you are taking with the UCL is quite strategic. specifically for where we are as an institution. And I must say, congratulations on even this particular dimension of micro-credentialing. I know this has been a conversation in the university for several years, and Prof, in 2 weeks, Prof materialized a webinar on this. You really have your finger on the pulse of this, so I really want to congratulate and compliment you on this particular task that you put up and where you want to see the institution. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, as I said. So it's my pleasure at this time to talk a little bit about the idea of micro-credentialing. And when I was invited by the colleagues, and in a similar fashion as the colleagues have noted, Prof. Makashwa asked in the morning, and by the afternoon he said, send me your bio. So, but the good thing about it was that it gave me an opportunity to critically reflect on where we were as an institution in terms of coming from 2016 when we started the idea of a UNISA open learning initiative and how that has evolved, and now seeing exactly where UCL wants to go in terms of these developments. It shows us that there's an historical progression of thought, an institutional knowledge of where we've come from and where we want to go as an institution. I think that's quite important for us, specifically for those that are sitting here, to understand that background. And when I thought of a presentation, I thought, let me try to title the presentation a bit so that we have a little bit of context to where we are as an institution. And I titled this presentation, New Trajectories for Learning in the Global South. And there's a reason why I am talking about the Global South. You'll see this as I start to unpack a little bit about the presentation. But we really need to start thinking of towards a South African ecosystem. Okay, can I control here, please? Thanks. Towards a South African ecosystem of micro-credentialing in higher education. And the reason why I'm talking about, firstly, the Global South is that we need to start emphasizing our own context. And as Prof. Nkosi has said, we need to be continent responsive. We're not the Global North. We have a different context altogether. The second part of the ecosystem, which I would unpack, is that we cannot function in silos anymore. We need to start thinking even ourselves as UNISA, how do we fit into a network society such that when our students graduate, they graduate even from these SLPs, Mr. Semkakana, that recognition is given across the country to them. So let me start a little bit about the overview of where I want to see us go today. I want to start a little bit about understanding the changing South African landscape. We really need to plot that as the first part. Building from there, I want to talk about a working definition of micro-credentials. And as I start to talk about the working definition of micro-credentials, I want to draw a little bit upon the European Union Commission and their national framework and the Australian Open Universities to see what they have done and how they've conceptualized this. And then I want to talk about something about the current trends in micro-credentialing, the opportunities and challenges. I think we must be realistic, Prof. Makashwa, is that this is a new phenomenon to us. It's not new in terms of its application, but for us in the South African context, this is new, which means that we are going to have a lot of challenges that we need to address as part of this. And then I want to talk about what would a South African ecosystem of micro-credentialing in higher education look like. Some preliminary thoughts on that, and as I see many people that are seated around here, the question is, how does this matter to you? You're here today, but how does this matter to you as you sit here? And lastly, I want to end with prospects for transforming the higher education, some continent context responsive issues of where we find ourselves. So let me, okay, colleagues, this is, okay, I think you'll have to change. That's technology for us. But it's lucky it's not ESCOM, so we're good, we're safe. So let's start a little bit about understanding the changing South African context. And as we start to unpack this, the very first few things that I want to talk about is 4 key elements that I want to unpack with us this morning. The first is digital transformation. You've heard Prof. Nkosi address this, you've heard Mr. Semkakana address this, you've even heard the program director talk about transformation from a digital perspective. Secondly, I want to talk about contextually relevant transformation. What does this mean for us? Policy-driven transformation, and I think Prof. Nkosi actually touched a little bit about this in the morning. And then skills transformation of where we see ourselves. So let me, next slide, thanks. So where do we see ourselves? Let's look at digital transformation. Firstly, we know that when we talk of digital transformation, it is disruptive and radical transformation. It means that we can no longer do business as we've been doing it in the past decades. The exact same thing, Mr. Sam Kakana works with SLPs. If we talk about digital disruption and digital transformation, it means we need to rethink how we deliver our SLPs in the institution as well. What does it mean for us? Firstly, technology, more specifically information and communication technologies, have disrupted the existing norm. They've challenged historical perceptions and categorizations of Africa, more specifically the notion of Africa being underdeveloped. If we look at how we've overnight integrated technology in many parts of it, even in terms of where we find ourselves as an institution, that categorization of underdeveloped needs to be debated. Now, why I'm saying this is because the nature of our progressive evolution as a country, the way we paced ourselves, if I look at many people here today, and if I were to ask you, how many of you have more than one phone, even while you're here? And people are smiling because they're guilty of this. And I always ask myself, why do people have more than one phone? I'm not going to ask you that question. But the fact that access to technology, the access to devices, our integration into this questions how we see ourselves and categorize ourselves as underdeveloped. And for me, that has been one of the greatest stigmatization of us as a country, is to categorize ourselves on negativity. Secondly, digital transformation, ushering new spaces of online engagement. It bridges the geographical distances. When we're sitting in here, we have people that are watching the live stream across the country, even in other parts as well. And it's through technology that we are bridging this distance. But in addition to that, there is also an element of social diversity that is being crossed, which speaks directly to our mandate as an institution. The 4R, despite infrastructure challenges, Africa should not be excluded from the discourse. And I say this over and over again. Even as an institution, we should be at the forefront of this, developing a response to Africa's 4R mandate. In addition to that, the pandemic COVID-19 has increased the pace of digitalization and adoption. What we know is that before COVID, there has been many resistance towards an adaptation of technology. But if we ask the same colleagues now who resisted technology before, do you embrace technology? They can't picture themselves outside of the technology space, right? Proliferation of connectivity, the mobile access in Africa, has created increasing points of connectivity. And one of the things, Mr. Sam Kakana, Prof. Makasho, that you need to think about is even as you start thinking of micro-credentialing and SLPs, we cannot ignore the fact that we have a large percentage of our country's population accessing learning through mobile devices. While we haven't actually fully engaged in mobile teaching and learning, maybe this is a space for us to really develop proofs of concepts of how mobile teaching and learning can take place in this institution. Next slide, please. Next slide, colleagues, thanks. Contextually relevant transformation. So when we talk of contextually relevant transformation, what are we talking about here? We're talking about birthing of innovation that seeks to address the social, cultural, economic, and political factors of the African continent, which means that we do not operate in isolation from policies that shapes who we are as a country, who we are as an institution. And we also need to think of innovation that is designed in and for Africa, continental responsiveness. Now, going back to my title of A Global South, is that while it is good to benchmark ourselves against the North, we need to think about the uniqueness of our context in and for Africa, which means that our context is defined by the challenges that we experience, which means that the solutions need to really come from our side as well, right? Next slide, colleagues. The policy-driven transformation, and this for me is an important part, because when we think of policy-driven transformation, why I'm actually talking about a policy-driven transformation is because I'm trying to look at a unifying factor that can eventually lead to what I see later on, that replicates the European Union's commission of a national across the continent kind of platform, or the Australian Open Universities across national framework. And this is what we think about, is what are the policy-driven transformations that unifies us across the continent even. Africa 2063 agenda, the UN SDGs that Prof. Nkosi has mentioned. It speaks to well-educated citizens, a skills revolution, and some of these terminology that I'm using, revolution, radical, disruption, is intentional. It's the idea for us to break the norm of how we see things in the space, even from an higher education perspective. It is underpinned by science, technology, and innovation. We are also seeing the integration of science, technology, and innovation driven from skills revolution, which means that it seeks to ensure inclusive, equitable, quality education. And that's important, the inclusiveness of how we position micro-credentialing. In addition to that is the key word of lifelong learning opportunities for all. Higher education institutions, we need to think of internal strategies, the mission and mandate that is designed to respond to our continent's challenges. And this is where, when we think of the SLPs, it's not just a nice to have. If we have SLPs that are nice to have, we will have reduced student numbers. But if we have SLPs that are a necessity for our country, a necessity for our continent, it means the impact of what we're putting will show in terms of where our energy and resources are being implemented. Next slide, please. Thanks. Oh, it's working now. Thanks. Perfect. Labor-driven skills transformation. I think this is quite an important one for us. Is a transformed labor market. New jobs that did not exist before COVID-19. I recall talking to Dr. Andrea Inamarato dos Santos a few weeks ago, and one of the things that we were talking about is a presentation of Moodle in Spain. And when she spoke about the idea that there are new job opportunities, everyone heard of the concept metaverse? Metaverse, when you think of metaverse, what's the first thing that comes? Don't tell me Facebook, yes. Metaverse, Facebook. But there are these types of concepts, these types of new job opportunities that are coming out, constructing architectures of metaverse, etc., are new job opportunities that didn't exist before COVID. As we have an evolution of technology, these are new job opportunities. What does it mean for us of where we are seeing this? It means that there is a urgency towards us understanding emergent skills, new competencies in response to a changing labor market. So what does that mean? It means reskilling and it means upskilling, right? But it also means developing our graduates with those skills. Because it's useless our graduates exit from here, get into a working place with a paper-based qualification and can't do anything. Right? So this is quite important, is how even, Mr. Sam Kekana, that you think about even where you are at, developing those skills of our students. So they have these additional parts of augmenting what they come in terms of a bundled qualification at the end of the day. In terms of graduate attributes, the future proof of workforce is that we need to think about future-proofing our students. That's a concept that is used of graduate attributes. And then the critical 4R skills, which has dominated much of our conversation: complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, cognitive flexibility. These are skills that we need to start thinking of even as you start thinking of what SLPs that you need to start developing. As I'm stressing this, the nice to have SLPs will give us the opportunity to show where we are, but the necessity of these type of SLPs, which brings out the multi-transdisciplinary nature of where you find yourself as an SLP unit. Now let's look at understanding the changing landscape, and there are three components that I thought as when I looked at micro-credentialing, and I thought there are three categories that really speaks to how we see this landscape changing. The first one is that when we think of micro-credentialing, we think of rapid responsive learning, right? Rapid responsive learning. It means learning takes place fast, at a quick pace, right? Quick knowledge transfer. Ubiquitous learning approaches, which means open learning, right? The rapidness talks about the idea that if there is an upskilling in our labor market, we cannot think about developing courses that have 6 months to take those skills into the labor market. We need to think of how do we take those skills immediately so that our graduates get a place in those spaces. 6 months means people are without salary. 6 months means people without money. And I mean, we really need to think some of those critical elements. Digital learning, agile, flexible learning modalities. Now this is quite important. The agile, flexible nature of your courses, which means that the idea of these structured ways of how we perceive short learning courses needs to be challenged and needs to be debated. Which also means that our processes for approvals of these SOPs, and now I'm touching on dangerous ground now, but I think we need to talk about this. The processes of approvals for these needs to be flexible and agile, which means that we cannot have a need in a labor market and UNISA taking 6 months to respond to that need before they can even implement it to get the approval processes done. I'm a UNISA person, so I can talk from UNISA perspective. 1 month, okay. That's good, that's shorter, 1 month. But the idea here, Prof, is if you see what I'm saying, is that the need for us to really think of how responsive we are, is that if there is a need, and this is where maybe as UNISA we lose the edge of the labor market by delaying the process where we have the skills and the competence and the knowledges, but the internal process of where we see ourselves are delayed, which is something that we need to rethink. What you learn, content, where you learn delivery mode, and how you learn platform, which means that even as we start thinking of SLPs and as we start to think of the Center for Lifelong Learning, the Center for Lifelong Learning is not a silo. It is an integrated part of expertise that it needs to network across colleges, which means that you need to tap into, even as you start thinking of micro-credentialing, is the resources that are already part of our institution in terms of the expert skills that are out there. This means that we need to think about how do we create networks that are able to benefit across academic disciplines. And I'm thinking, I'll give you an example just now when I start to unpack of how we see the interdisciplinary nature of this. But what we really need to think about is that there are experts sitting with knowledge. There are experts sitting with how to deliver the content. There are experts sitting with how platforms need to be developed. And that's the type of skills that you need to start bringing into your space. The third part is of recognizing learning. And this is the proliferation of learning opportunities and providers is a challenge for us in this country. Overnight, you will receive 10 emails of somebody having some kind of workshop in one of Santon's halls or one of Protea hotels with this program on it. You know what I'm talking about, colleagues? And then they promise you a free iPad and a free laptop. That proliferation kills the quality of education and training that we're putting out. It's a marketing opportunity, and this is the bad part because we often find in the trap of those providers. And we need to start thinking of how do we regulate this, because money invested by the institution could be money redirected into your spaces. How do we regulate some of these things? And now, maybe it's not just a question for us as an institution, but maybe it's a question for us even as part of the Department of Higher Education. How do we start regulating some of these bodies or some of these companies that claim to offer quality education and get a badge or get a credit, get an attendance certificate at the end of the day? It's easy ways to sell it, but the challenge here is that we need to start thinking of quality mechanisms across this. How do we quality assure the return of investment with desired competencies? Now, towards a working definition of micro-credentialing, and this is where we now start to really unpack this. The term micro-credential is not a new phenomenon, colleagues. It is largely already been concentrated in the Europe, UK, and US. It might be new to us as a phenomenon, as a new concept, but it is already tested in certain spaces. It has recently gained much momentum and visibility in Africa, especially against the pandemic when we have these emergent skills that came out. A critical challenge for understanding the concept is the often interchangeable use, and this is where it becomes problematic. When you talk of MOOCs, people misunderstand it and say micro-credentialing. When you talk of short learning courses, people think that it's interchangeable with micro-credentialing. When you think of digital certificates, badges, and open badges, people misunderstand and say micro-credentialing. there's a distinction that I want to draw with this morning. This confusion and misrepresentation is what has allowed industry not to recognize some of the things that are being offered, right? Secondly, added to this confusion is the recent trend to devalue the currency of micro-credentialing by simply adding these types of recognitions to people who attend the sessions like this year. So for example, in typical Oprah fashion, everybody gets a certificate today, right? This kind of warm, seat warmers, and you get a recognition. It loses the value of micro-credentialing. Virtual attendees, you attend a seminar, and without even assessing your competencies and whether you achieved what was done as part of seminar, you say, here's a badge, go and throw it up on your social media spaces. That devaluing of currency is problematic for us in the higher education space. The lack of clarity and authentic assessment of competencies has placed micro-credentialing in a complex position that needs to be debunked today to ascertain its true value. So even as you are getting into the space of short learning programs, the question is that you need to think about these issues that are challenging how we see micro-credentialing. Now, let me look at two examples. The first example is the European Commission. The European Commission has done extensive work on this, and this is how they define micro-credentialing, and I think this is a good way for us. So let's look at this particular definition. They say that micro-credential is a record of the learning outcomes, that's important, of the learning outcomes that a learner has acquired following a small volume of learning. Now that's important. Learning outcomes specific to small volume of learning, right? And we're going to stress that small part because the granular component of a micro-credential is an important part. These learning outcomes have been assessed against transparent and clearly defined standards. So this is the European Union Commission. This is what they are saying. Courses leading to micro-credentials are designed to provide the learner with specific knowledge, skills, and competencies that respond to societal, personal, cultural, and labor market needs. So there's a directed development towards this. It is responsive to these different needs, which means that even as you start thinking of developing the micro-credentials in line with those niche areas, the catalytic niche areas that you've identified, and you said by June we should have, how responsive are you to those catalytic niche areas to the challenges that we are facing in the continent? It's not about a catalytic niche area and claiming we have a micro-credential. Are we in that niche responding to the continent's challenges? Micro-credentials are owned by the learner. There's an ownership, which means that it can be shared and are portable. They may be standalone or combined into larger credentials, and they are underpinned by a quality assurance following an agreed standard in relevant sector of in the relevant sector or area of activities. That means there's a quality assurance and standardization of micro-credentials. But it's not done in isolation of just higher education. It is done in response to the sector as well. If we look at the standards that micro-credentials have been occupied by the EU Commission, quality fit for purpose, that means there's a clearly documented, accessible, meets the needs of the learners. Transparency, it means that there's clearly articulated learning outcomes, workload. The relevance is a standard. Valid assessment, now this is quite important because if we start thinking of micro-credentialing, there must be a formal assessment to assess those competencies. Learning pathways, that means it's flexible learning pathways. It is stackable, that means you can take more than one micro-credential, stack it to form a particular learning path. Recognition, now this is quite important. Is the EUC's recognition comparable across the European Union? We still struggle with that because of a lack of recognition in our country of micro-credentialing, right? Which means that even as you start to embark on micro-credentialing as the university, that micro-credentialing may not necessarily be recognized by the universities. Which means this is where, and I'm hoping that people from DED, Sakwa and the rest are listening to us, that we need to start having a national conversation around micro-credentialing. It cannot be isolated in an institutional context. It must occupy a national agenda if we want this to succeed. Portability means that there's stored and shared data by the credential holder, and learner-centered means that it is targeted for a specific group of learners. authentic. That means if an industry, a person in a specific industry or sector wants to see that the learning outcomes that you say you've achieved, they can tap into a digital archive and verify that that's really the outcome. Which means that there's a sense of transparency as opposed to a paper base where you simply frame it up and say you qualified in a certain qualification, get the degree, frame it up, and nobody knows the competencies that you are a bit beyond you. And this is where micro-credentialing comes an important part. We are able to validate the outcomes. So if you say, I can do X, Y, Z, then it means the competence that you achieve to that particular micro-credential certifies that you can do X, Y, Z. The information and guidance, and I think this is the promotion of lifelong learning, which is critical for us. Now let's look at the Open Universities Australia. They've got a similar model to the Open Universities to the European Union Commission, but there's quite an interesting development here of the lack of standardization across the globe. And this is something that I want to point out. It's maybe context derives how we see micro-credentialing, because you'll see how they define micro-credentialing. So the Open Universities of Australia defines it this way. A micro-credential is a short certification course that allows you to learn new professional skills very quickly. So the pace is still the same, quick, consistency, at a higher education level. Alternative learning opportunities for those who don't have time, money to enroll in a longer qualification. Standards set by a national micro-credential framework. So similar to the European Union Commission, there's a national agenda to standardize this. Now here's the interesting part. Time, minimum 1 hour. And I thought that was interesting. If we have micro-credentials that can be done in 1 hour, you will sell out. Talk about revenue, you will generate revenue. But if you look at this, 1 hour is a minimum standard to several months. And the European Union sees it as an equivalent of what they call 1 ET unit, which is equal to 25 hours minimum. So if you draw the distinction between 25 hours minimum in EU, 1 hour minimum in Australia Open University, it makes you kind of think about the context and the pace of learning drives how we see and define micro-credentialing, which means that even in our own context, we know for a fact that the longer you have students in a system, the longer nothing happens, right? If you are able to get students the knowledge quickly and get them out of the system and assess them faster, that quick knowledge transfer means greater student throughput and retention in it. They want to have a clear industry-based learning outcome. They want to test the knowledge through at least one assessment. And here's an important one, Mr. Samkan, is that the delivery of a micro-credential is not only online, which speaks to our context. It can be online, in person, or hybrid. Which means that even when you start thinking of SLPs and the idea of micro-credentialing, while we've moved into a digital space, the social aspects of your courses, of how you think of your short learning programs, means that you now start thinking of in a student in a regional, in a specific region that wants to do the course and may not necessarily have the skills and competencies to complete an SLP that is online. How do you bridge that gap that is socially relevant to that student? Now, if we combine the European Union Commission and the Australian Open Universities, there are some commonalities or similarities. The first thing is that a documented statement about a person's learning outcomes and competencies achieved through assessed is standard. Secondly is that in both contexts, there's a standardized framework that ensures portability across institutions and across the countries. The third, and this is quite important, if we think of lifelong learning, and if you think of micro-credentials, then it's a living document as opposed to a static document. A living document means that there's progressive learning and evolving throughout, as opposed to a static document and certificate that you just frame up, right? A validated set of data, personalized learning, and a subset of credentials, smaller units or short courses. Now here comes the emphasis on small as well. Now if you look at the terminologies, quick knowledge transfer, small, these are components of what are characteristic of the SLPs. Current trends in micro-credentialing. Now, if we look at some of the current trends and some of the providers like Coursera, edX, Udacity, Microsoft has their Microsoft Education, Mozilla Open Badges, which would release their badges, Future Learn, LinkedIn. What's interesting about this is, firstly, is that if we look at the kind of approaches and categories of our nano degrees, micro masters, open badges, these are categories that each one of these providers have identified and conceptualized around their own identity. Which means that when you talk of nano degrees, you immediately associate with a particular provider. When you talk of micro masters, it is a concept that gives a particular provider an identity. My question to us today is, when we think of UNISA and SLPs, when we think of UNISA and micro-credentialing, what type of identity do we want associated with us? And that's an important one as we start to unpack this. Now, current trends in micro-credentialing, and this is quite important, we think of stacking. That means that you build blocks. That means there are smaller courses which you can pack like Lego blocks, build something up with it, right? And these leads to larger, in more than one set, larger types of credentials that offer learning paths. Portability, it means it's transferable to different contexts, recognized across different networks. It also means that a credential is stored, secured, and validated. Now, which means, Mr. Sam Kakana, is you said by June, you're going to develop an open micro-credentialing. The question is, do we have the ICT infrastructure in place by June to archive that data? Possible. I think we need to have the VP of ICT and CIO sitting in this room. But that's an important one, is the integration of ICT infrastructure, is that it's not a typical learning management system. When we think of micro-credentialing, a person in industry must be able to tap in to see that particular credential that you've issued, whether it is really legit or not. And our learning management systems don't offer that. So we really need to think of the ICT infrastructure that leads back to the portability of where we saw ourselves. The digital and network, the data digitally archived on a learner experience portal, and here as well, the idea of different permeations. That means that if we really want micro-credentialing to work in this country, we need to think of different permeations of micro-credentialing. That means that as we, for example, if we are issuing a micro-credentialing here, we should have, through our MOUs, and this is quite important for me, we've established a lot of MOUs in the past year. If we do not take that MOUs and start to materialize it, it will be MOUs that are simply stored in somebody's office that is their paper-based. The UCL, you've already got the basis for you. Think of the MOUs that you've already signed with in terms of our university, is to develop that as a network of across universities, offering specialized micro-credentials that we can allow our students to tap into. 90% of the battle is already done. You've already got an MOU signed. All it means is now us sustaining those relationships and getting them on board on these things. International badging platforms are good. They give us exposure to other universities, but when I start to unpack this in terms of challenges, you're going to see what's one of the challenges. We think of modular, and maybe Mr. Sam Kakana and Prof. Makasho, we need to think, when you talk about re-envisioning SLPs, our SLPs, some of them are generally very long. And when we think of micro-credentialing are small granular units of quick competency building, which means that we need to rethink even the time one spends in some of these SLPs that we want to categorize. The standard units expressed as learning, outcomes, and here is a challenge, is that we need to think of open access as a philosophy to our SLPs. Now you may say, but Denzel, you're now getting into the point of where you're questioning my revenue part of it, which Mr. Sam Kakana said, that's our mandate, our third stream revenue in the university. But there is a way for us to ensure revenue, and I'm going to come back to that just now. But if we truly want to materialize ourselves as a university, and think about micro-credentialing within an ODL context, then we can't think of a closed circuit of SLPs. It's not possible if we want to think of ourselves as an ODL offering lifelong learning. For me, the moment we think of lifelong learning and if we think of a closed system, we contradict each other. We think of lifelong learning, we think of open access, And that's the question of where we need to go. But I'm going to come back to your point, Mr. Samkan, on revenue. And then universal, the bridge between different learning forms and contexts. And this was an important characteristic of how we see micro-credentialing in terms of these developments. Now, here, the challenges, because with every micro-credentialing comes challenges, and I want to actually foreground this with us. Firstly, and I'm hoping that we have key people that are also listening to us and watching us. In our South African context, there are lack of practical examples of micro-credentialing. The lack of practical examples of micro-credentialing means that industries don't trust micro-credentialing because we don't have a prototype. We don't have a proof of concept that is being explored. The lack of recognition mechanisms, the lack of a national standard of framework for micro-credentialing across the country means that industries don't have anything to benchmark against it. And I'm hoping that Diet and Seko can come to the table and say, can we now have a conversation around how do we develop a national standard framework for micro-credentialing that can be all institutions accountable, which will be our first step. The lack of alignment with industry and professional bodies. And there's a second part of it. We always talk about industry, but we don't talk about professional bodies. And that's important for us, is the lack of industry and professional bodies and alignment. The third part, the next part is the cost implications of it. If you ever explored digital badges, you will know that there are certain providers, like for example, Credly and Badger. And in the course of the earlier part of the year, we actually started to explore it. And we looked at what are the costing implications of a model in terms of an international platform. And our main idea of an international platform for Badger was, you've got all these big universities on it. It gives us the visibility, right? And to think along those lines, firstly, which is our mistake, because when you get these subscriptions of these companies like Badger and Credly, you can't sustain it, right? Which means that we can use grant money and we can use seed fund to innovate, but when that runs out, the entire initiative, because we have an interdependency on these international bodies, falls off, right? Which is our major challenge. If we can't sustain a badging company like one of these companies, because they are subscription per student, subscription per badge in some cases, which means that innovation falls off. It means that all what you put on the table in terms of micro-credentialing and the visibility falls off. And the question that I came and asked myself is that if in the South African and African context, our challenge is sustainability, then why can't we develop our own Credly, our own Badger that speaks to the reputation of our continent itself? Why can't we make room for institutions inside, and maybe this is something that you need to think about, Prof, is that to rethink UNISA's position in a continent's perspective. There are institutions inside our continent that don't even have learning management systems, that don't have, that would love to go onto a badging perspective, micro-credentialing, but don't have those resources. Why can't we be responsive to that and provide these services to that? That's part of what a lifelong learning center could do, to achieve that, to be responsive to our country, but responsive to higher education challenges in a sense of lack of infrastructure for us not to be independent on the global north. Right. The additional part of why I am stressing our interdependence on the global north is that if we start to become too dependent upon the global north, is that we fall in the trap of gatekeeping. And I've seen this, is where some universities, because of where they come from in terms of their geographical location, are said, you do not qualify for these spaces, right? Irrespective of whether they have the experts behind them. Then there are higher qualification that comes in and says that you need to be centers of excellence. Now I can understand benchmarking, but you've got to understand our African context, right? And we're speaking from our African context, which means that we need to really think about how do we address these challenges, the interdependency on the global north, the gatekeeping of the global north. Now, I don't have a problem with the global north, but when we start to be dependent upon them, that's when we have problems, and we define our space on that basis. The proliferation of providers, if not regulated, and then seen as unbundling higher education as opposed to enhancing augmented. We cannot, where we are, start to think of micro-credentialing as replacing quality, as replacing our qualifications and degrees. We're not there yet. And I think we mustn't be as ambitious to that or we set ourselves up as failure. We must think of micro-credentialing as a way to enhance and augment our current qualifications, right? And then the lack of business models means that we cannot sustain this. And this is quite an important one for me. Now, let me get to the point of a South African ecosystem. This is where I'm narrowing down my conversation now to really think about our South African ecosystem. Firstly, we have nano-credentials, right? Nano-credentials are what we call informal, non-formal, the use of type of digital badges, etc. The use of certificates of participation, the certificates of attendance. And these are used to foster a culture of lifelong learning. So you have what we call nano-credentials. They're not the formal micro-credentials, they're nano, right? So you will attend a workshop like this and you'll get a certificate of participation. We cannot do without that as yet. I'll tell you why. Because we have not fully materialized a culture of lifelong learning in this country. Which means that if we want to get from nano-credentials to micro-credentials, we need a cultural mindset shift in this country. And the first way of that is to say, where do we start with our students? Where do we start with some of our participants? And the reality is we got to start with where they understand. And as much as I hate to say this, is that for many people, seeing that paper in front of them, as opposed to seeing something on their phone with a digital, makes a big difference, right? It's a cultural mindset. It's what we need to challenge. But the reality is we still deal with that on a daily basis. Right? Where we need to move is from nano-credentials to micro-credentials. The formal, semi-formal, accredited, recognized, stackable building blocks used to close the skills competencies, collaboration with industry, professional bodies, and we need to think of a national standard framework. This is where we think of digitalized metadata, learning experience portals, digital badges, open badges, blockchain. This is where we want to be as an institution. But the reality is it's a road traveled. Whether we will attain that in June or not is yet to be seen. But the fact is, we know where we're going. We know what we want to achieve. But the reality is, in the same line, is there are things and processes that needs to be in place for us to successfully be where we want to be in place. And this is where the alignment of infrastructure, the alignment of these type of things becomes quite critical for us. Now, in addition to that, when we talk of an ecosystem, and I use this purposely in my title, an ecosystem is not a silo, it's a network, right? And when we think of ecosystems, the two ideas first of thinking of an ecosystem is to think of centers of lifelong learning across the country, in different universities, as you can see in the diagram, being linked to a particular platform, and that means that UNISA student could tap into any of those university offerings and do that as part of their with no stigmatization, firstly, that you're a UNISA student, with no restrictions that you do not qualify for this. That's the ideal model of where we want to be as a country in terms of lifelong learning, in terms of micro-credentialing. The second part is that when we think of lifelong learning, and Prof. Nkosi, this is my part here, is that, and this is my challenge, coming from College of Human Sciences as well, is whenever people talk about artificial intelligence, the first thing they go to is colleges that are in technology, that are in engineering, but they forget that the human aspect of artificial intelligence is a human sciences element, right? There is a human sciences element to it. There's an ethics of artificial intelligence. There's an interaction between a human person and an artificial intelligence element. Why are we left out of the conversation every time this happens, right? Now this is what I'm talking about, your colleagues. If I give you an example of when we talk of multi, inter, and transdisciplinary, now Mr. Sam Kikana, this is what my thinking is that a student at UNISA should be able to take a micro-credentialing package of several courses from UCL and say, when I finish this qualification, I have 6 stackable micro-credentials that speaks to artificial intelligence in an African context, right? That's my what we would call a UNISA EduPass, for lack of a better word, right? The student should be able to take a micro-credential course that is offered by a discipline such as computing on AI functions, algorithms, etc. The student should then be able to take a course that speaks to the ethics of AI, right, offered by the human sciences, social sciences. And the student should also be able to take a course on, from management sciences on how to manage, for example, data generated through AI technology or cost efficiency. That is the multi-interdisciplinary nature of micro-credentialing. Picking across, and now what this actually teaches us is that, and going back to my earlier point, is that when we think of an ecosystem, we can't reimagine UCL as a silo outside of the ecosystem. It's got to be integrated, which means that the offerings also needs to think about is that how do we now start bridging the gap across disciplines in what we are offering. 3 spheres of the ecosystem, and this is where Dr. James, Genevieve, you might find this quite interesting. The first part is that when we think of a series of 3 spheres of micro-credentialings, and I know you have your mandate, but Prof. Nkosi set the context for me, in a sense that she said that there's a community engagement part of it as well. And there's 3 spheres that I want to put on. The first part is that when we think of micro-credentialing, we cannot think of micro-credentialing in isolation from our learners that are in the system and our graduates. Now, why I'm saying this is that we need to think of developing the skills of learners to make them transition to an higher education environment, from school to higher education. Simultaneously, we need to think of foundational digital skills that prepares them for the workforce. Now, currently, we train students with digital skills. We train students with how to use productivity apps, Microsoft productivity apps. We teach students on cybersecurity. But a student goes into the workforce with no verification that they've actually attained those qualifications, those learning outcomes. But yet, we've done the work, right? Which is a challenge for us as an institution, is that we're not giving our students enough evidence to leverage what they've done in this institution. Secondly, is community-based. Is that when we think of micro-credential community-based, we must think, for example, of how do we collaborate with communities. And when I thought of this, and I thought, for example, more specifically of when we think of entrepreneurial skills in communities. And then we tell our students, go to, for example, and I hope somebody from the banking industry is watching this, and we tell our students, go to the banks, put your proposal on the table. And our students go, some of them. Some of them are fortunate enough to get funded. And then they come out and they struggle, right? And part of that cycle is that we haven't fully equipped our students to deal with what it means to manage those funds, right? Why can't we, Prof. Makasha, with industry, with, for example, the finance and banking sector, say to the banking sector, before you give those students, those entrepreneurs, get them to come and complete an SLP with us, a micro-credential. That micro-credential will eliminate the risk of a student failing in those entrepreneurial skills, right? It's a partnership between community-based, financial sector to ensure that we reduce the risk across the country, but we become, as an institution, as UCL, a strategic part even of community engagement at a different level. And the industry is to close the gaps of reskilling and upskilling industry to continuous evolving industry, but continuous professional development. And maybe we need to also think about this, Mr. Kakana, is to stay at the cutting edge of one's field. We need to think of SLPs or micro-credentials as just-in-time training for specialized skills, right? Just-in-time training for specialized skills. Because if we want to gain that relevancy, we need to do that. The ecosystem, and this is where it's a pity that our VC is not here, but when we had our DED visit, one of our VC's points was that we need to rethink articulation. And maybe micro-credentialing, maybe, just maybe, micro-credentialing, stackable. And she spoke about, for example, when you have a 3-year qualification, right? The first year could be, for example, a certificate. The student can exit the system after 1 year. But if the student wants to come back in the system and do the second year, it could lead to a diploma. And if the student wants to exit, it's fine, exit. But if the student wants to come back into the system and then get the 3rd year and become a macro-credential and a degree, which means we're creating that flexibility for our students. Right? But then where does micro-credentials comes in? Micro-credentials comes in is when students do not meet those requirements, when students do not have those basic knowledge. We can use micro-credentials as a way to build blocks into a higher credential path, thereby opening learning opportunities for our students, as well as for people who did not have that opportunity into the space. Right? So it's quite a different model, because now you're now thinking, Mr. Samkan, I'm giving you more job. But I'm actually trying to show you that it's not an isolation of the bigger debate. Okay, and then my second last slide, business model, Mr. Revenue, and I think this is where the money part comes in. And this is my proposal to UCL, is we need to think of an open learning model. And when we think of micro-credentialing specifically, step one should be a student should identify a micro-credential. When we have more than one micro-credential, a student should say, I want to do this micro-credential, look at it, identify it. Step two, enroll for the micro-credential, right? Step three, once they finish enroll for the micro-credential, once they've completed the course, they are satisfied that they've gained the knowledge and competencies, they then do step three, is pay for an amount for registration and assessment. Only after they've identified, enrolled, they've got the competencies, they're comfortable enough to know they will pass the assessment, right? We don't set our students up for failure. We set our students up to succeed, and on their own time. Once they pay their amount, they can then complete the assessment and receive a micro-credential on successful completion. It's a rethinking, and I know it's going to challenge you a bit, because we always want money right at the beginning. But the thing is, if we want to succeed as an institution in response to society, if we want to succeed in response to where we want to go, then maybe we need to rethink this entire model. And I'm happy that you're rethinking, because now I'm throwing something else on the table. Because if we're thinking of the openness of our institution, if we're thinking of our community mandate, if we're thinking of our social mandate, if we're thinking of continent responsive, then we gotta be responsive to a point of where we are responsible as an institution to our students to set themselves up to pass and attain the learning outcomes, as opposed to take their money and let them fail in a system. It can't work if we do business the same way. And that's my business model to you. We will still succeed, we will still get money, but we need to rethink of where we place our students in this business model. And my last part, my closing part, is prospects for transformation, higher education, context responsive. Is that when we think of micro-credentialing, it offers us flexible and personalized learning, but it allows people to now take the ownership of the learning journey. It allows for closer relationship of higher education with industry, professional bodies, and stakeholders. It moves to a recognition of granular competencies, which means we're really thinking smaller blocks. And I know Jessica is gonna talk about this, but when we talk of increasing university visibility, we talk about brand. Accumulated open technologies, open platforms, and an accumulated portfolio of evidence is that when we think of some of these professional bodies, for example, engineering, etc., there's a full body of evidence that they want, right? Intensify employability with skilled labor workforce that is knowledgeable and competent. And the last part is quite important for me, is if we do this right, we will be able to move from an ecosystem of inside South Africa to an ecosystem in Southern Africa of micro-credentialing to an ecosystem in an African ecosystem. And that's where we want to be as an institution, responsive to the continent as an African ecosystem of micro-credentialing. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chetty. I've really learned a lot from you today. And in the spirit of digital transformation, next time I won't be running around with these. Okay. It gives me a pleasure to introduce Ms. Jessica Nell, the winner of the UNISA Excellence in Tuition Award for Student Support and College Award for the same in 2019 and 2021. Jessica embraces new technologies and methods for teaching and student support in the e-learning environment. In her 13 years of tuition experience, she has been involved in the tuition of 8 modules in management sciences, redeveloping a number of them in the process. In 2021, she became a certified business advisor using the Growth Wheel platform with the aim of assisting SMMEs in Africa, and embarked on the University of Oldenburg online teaching and learning program to acquire a second master's in ODL. In this program, she discovered the potential of the digital credentialing landscape and has worked to bring concepts like micro-credentials, alternative digital credentials, and open badges into the institution's strategic agenda. In 2022, Jessica was seconded into the Center of Professional Development at UNISA, and together with experts in higher education at the 26 public universities of South Africa, has contributed towards the Helm University Lecturer Development Program. She has now found a permanent home at UNISA's Directorate of Curriculum Development and Transformation, where she will continue to work hand in hand with faculties to integrate transformative and quality online courses and teaching. Jessica, please. Thank you.
See, I'm the short one in this family today. Let's do this. Do I have a roaming microphone? That's the one. I don't tend to stand in one place. Okay. Okay, welcome everyone. Is this test, test, test? Can you hear me clearly? Thank you. I don't like to stand at podiums. It's not my thing. I also like to walk and think at the same time. And Dr. Chetty has certainly given us all a lot to think about. That is for sure. So I had to prepare a little bit of a presentation in response to Dr. Chetty. But obviously now that he's done his presentation, there's some more food for thought that we want to leverage off of. But I just want to help you all to have a bit of a quick recap. And where is that clicker? There we go. So what we can see from this is there are a lot of implications for micro-credentials. And as was mentioned in my bio, I want to also make some distinctions. It's not just micro-credentials, it's badges. It's alternative digital credentials, it's OERs, it's MOOCs. There is an entire landscape of credentials, and a degree is just one of them. That can be considered a macro credential. Now, in our context of open and distance e-learning, I remember once going to one of the seminars in the Western Cape, and a young lady stood up. Thank you. I was going to bell over that at some point. A young lady stood up, and I remember she left me in tears, telling the story of how long it took to get her degree, 8 years. Telling the story of having to use a sock as a sanitary pad for her family to help afford her education. And that, for me, is where micro-credentials have their potential. Right now, our degrees, our qualifications can easily take years for our students to achieve. And what's worse is by the end of that time, 8 years, 6 to 8 years, that information that the student has learned might have completely fallen out of its usefulness. And for me, micro-credentials present the opportunity to be responsive and agile to the industry needs. Then something else that was brought up, and I'm glad Dr. Chetty brought it up as well, is verification of learning outcomes or evidence of learning. And something we're seeing today is the idea of more skills, things I can do rather than what I know about. Where is the evidence that you can actually perform these functions, that you actually have these competencies? You might know as much as you want to about any specific theory, but how does that apply in the real world? And there I see another potential for micro-credentials. To me, they came across as a lot more of a skills and competencies focus. When you're in the working place and you identify you have a skills gap, you need to be able to go and plug in that skills gap, not learn a new theory. And that's where micro-credentials can come into being. And for me, then again, they have a huge potential to bridge the gap between industry and higher education, something that we're often accused of having a widening gap of. So micro-credentials, for me, have to really be part of a conversation with the real world. We can't conceive of them in our own spaces. Yes, they should be transdisciplinary, but not just at UNISA. They need to come about as a result of strong ties, relationships with industry as well. That speaks into the concept of lifelong learning, but also professional development, continuous professional development specifically. We have the nano component, the short time scale coming across, because guess what? We are more than ever busier than ever. It is not just about our jobs, we have our families. More and more, we are becoming a more equal society. Men are shouldering more of the burden of the home. We still have a while to go there. And experience speaking here. But there is a growing need on us at home as well. Now we have working from home. So our families are in our lives a lot more. We can't afford to push them to the side for hours and hours at a time while we focus on how many articles and books, and it's just not possible anymore. So that smaller component is really crucial. But something that's in one of Dr. Chetty's last slides that I really picked up on was the openness. Offer that information openly. When the student is ready, that's when they might pay to be assessed, to have someone confirm that they've understood everything correctly, that they have evidence that they can do this skill, that they have this competency. And for me, that was very important, because that lady who took 8 years, she could have judged for herself when she was ready to enter into the formal space, be verified, be accredited, and receive that recognition in that space. So it really is a lot more to the benefit of the student. It's responsive. It is not about making a profit, colleagues. It's from, there's a recent article by Dr. Olcott. He's like, it's not going to make you money. And you have to remember, we are in service of humanity. We have a social justice mandate. We are not here to make money. We want to be sustainable. But our priority is to our students, to their betterment. So I want to quickly take you back to what's in a degree. And I'm going here, I'm talking about I talked about the larger institution, but a lot of you here are academics. And what does micro-credentials mean for you? Or even deans and deputy directors. So I want to help contextualize a micro-credential for you and show you that it's actually already in place. It's just how you're packaging it. When you have a degree, you have a curriculum. It goes according to your qualification mixture of the university. You have to get approval in spaces like SAQA and CHE. And again, I'm with Dr. Chetty there. I hope you are listening today. And within that curriculum, you have a number of modules that speak to the purpose of that curriculum. Its critical cross-field outcomes, its objectives. So those modules or those courses in themselves are a smaller component. Then you get judged, you go and you complete that module, you do a few assessments. If you're doing continuous assessment, you might build up a nice portfolio of your learning along the way. And someone says, yes, you've got these learning outcomes under your belt. Here's a certificate or a degree or a diploma. Now, let me just drill it down a little bit more for you. Within a module, we have specific objectives. We have assessment criteria. We have learning outcomes and evidence of those learning outcomes through assessment criteria. So I did this mind map. And you might have seen a little flow through here. The trees. The whole bushy tree of the learning landscape. Every leaf, a different form of accreditation. In a degree, the tree trunk of the main components of the degree, like a general BCom. What you absolutely have to know in this field. But they're often surrounded by modules that you can pick or choose from. Those are your electives. Those are your leaves. I would like to say strip it down. have that single tree trunk of what a person absolutely has to know about that field, and have different leaves in your micro-credentials. Allow your modules to be broken down a little bit further. This is where it gets a little bit complicated. So this is a general mind map of what a curriculum and a module looks like. You can see the branches for every module within that curriculum. But then within that specific module, there's your syllabus, there's your specific objectives, there's your assessment criteria. That is how the assessment criteria are judged. You have assessments 1 to 6. If you're doing continuous assessment, you might have a few assignments and an exam. It's all different assessment strategies. The whole point is to gain evidence that you have achieved the learning objectives. So my question is, why can't we break it down to those assessments? If we listen to what Dr. Chetty was saying, and even what we see in the literature, we want some sort of verification, an assessment that you have achieved those objectives of that credential. So we have the components there, but this is more further down the line. Dr. Chetty has now approached it from the open side. I'm just showing you where you might make the jump. Because what's very important to me is recognition of prior learning. We have policies to recognize your prior learning. And one thing that I wish I would see more of, and I might be playing a bit of devil's advocate here. We had the complaint that there's no quality assurance, that there's people coming from any and everywhere offering micro-credentials. But in my mind, I thought to myself, well, if we think of this from an RPL perspective, from a community engagement perspective, someone who is just gaining skills throughout their life without ever receiving recognition of it or verification of it, we can't just throw that out. So how do we bring those people in from that open space? And it speaks to me, we need that accreditation space, the broader national framework for micro-accreditations. We need to maybe consider being able to retrospectively grant accreditation and verification. That also speaks to agility. 6 months? And Dr. Chetty, you were saying 1 month? You need to develop a micro-credential in 1 month? So where will the quality assurance come in there? So maybe an idea is, okay, embrace the non-formalness, embrace the messiness, embrace what comes from these open courses, these badges, these bum warming in the seats, because learning is happening. Learning is happening. And if we break it down into its smaller components, each one of those assessment criteria, if we map it, then we can start to recognize what's happening in this informal space. Now, what do I mean by mapping? This is just what I've seen. Remember, I'm coming from more of I was a lecturer, I was a professional developer. I'm not a researcher as yet. I like practical things. And I, in my own experience with, say, the learning management system, started to pick something up. When we looked at that overarching curriculum and modules, and we think about those assessment criteria, and we think about how a module is made where we specify those learning objectives, those are all micro portions of information. In a learning management system like Moodle, which we've just recently converted to, there are 2 settings that we always ignore: tags and competencies. Now, and I don't have access to it, but that competencies really piqued my interest. Why? When a module is developed, you have to put together what's called a Form 3. That lists all of these assessment criteria, that specifies these specific objectives. And I thought, well, when you put this onto a system, can't I specify, hey, this specific lesson speaks to these competencies? And someone in another module might have maybe one or two overlapping competencies. If you can map all of that, if you can map every single module form and every single assessment criteria and learning objective within every single curriculum in this country, if you had a framework with all of that information in place and you could pull from it, you could identify your module or your micro-credential as fulfilling that specific objective, then we can start to see how a student might get pulled into the system, how they might get some recognition of the learning that they've done. They are then verified through a verification body, the assessment. But even there, I have some thoughts. Because who's this actually about in the end? It's the student. So what does an exam do for a student? They can't take it into the business world. They can't offer it as a representation of themselves. So I'm going to jump past these two slides because this is where I want to focus on. Who's this the value to? It's the micro-credential is for the student. That's who we're thinking about. How is this going to benefit them? They need to have, over the course of their lifelong learning, an organic space that they can show to an employer that, yes, I can do this. I personally would do something like, your own web, your own blog, your own LinkedIn page. That's the digital space. But we need a way that the student can have this portfolio of evidence that is organic. Micro-credentials make it more organic. So there's another major key factor happening in personal branding, and I did tell Dr. Chetty I was going to go into the branding side of things. Micro-credentials represent an opportunity for you to differentiate yourself. You don't just have a degree and sit on it. You have to continuously show that you are keeping up to date, that your degree is not stagnant. You have to differentiate yourselves from the rest of the marketplace because jobs are hard to find, businesses are hard to start up, investors are hard to convince. So how do you know what you're talking about? I must give you my money to start your business. And personal branding, especially in the digital space, has found most of its momentum in professional development, your human resources, the business world. Not in musicians. It's got most of its momentum in the business world, where you are encouraged, even academics are encouraged, what's your H index? What's your impact factor? Where you're hosting your ORCID ID. That's all evidence of your personal brand. How much impact do you have? Every recent publication you have in research is evidence of your authenticity as an expert. It is evidence that you know what you're talking about. The same is for micro-credentials for the man in the street or woman in the street. Not everyone's going to go into academia. So micro-credentials is the average person's way of showing I have an authentic ability to say, yes, I'm an expert. You can hire me or you can invest in my ideas. It helps you to create a brand as a person, as a student, as a learner, as a lifelong learner. It helps you to create a brand. Every micro-credential you get, especially if it's hosted in a digital badge, for example, can be linked to your accounts. I've got a couple of key ideas there, LinkedIn, Twitter. People like to have a little evidence that, hey, I've accomplished this minor credential. So I will always come back to the person and how this can benefit the student. With micro-credentials, not only is it an opportunity to recognize what you've done in the past, but also to ensure your opportunities in the future. And with that, I'm going to finish off. Thank you. Oh, one more thing. Sorry. But I added one extra slide there, and I'm going to ask my colleagues there to post it wherever you're watching online. We can't just have the engagement here on the stage. So what we have here is called a Jamboard. And I've put some thoughts for discussion. How do we standardize the system to recognize micro-credentials? How do we ensure quality? What makes them speak to your needs? What do you need micro-credentials to do? And how are we going to combine that informal prior learning with the formal? Please go on that link that's been posted. You can add your own sticky notes and just free think, because we want you to have your say as well. Last time I checked, there was close to 100 people online. I don't know where it's standing at the moment. So please put your thoughts there so that we can bring it into the UCL space and actually have your voice. Thank you.
Wow. I think we've been given a baptism of fire into the micro-credentialing space. Very, very sincere thanks to Dr. Denzel Chetty for that very deep and rigorous keynote address, inspiring us and challenging us to think in new ways and to position our continent within this very exceptional disruptor in higher education. And Ms. Jessica Nell, we can see that we have what it takes within UNISA to actually drive this innovation with this level of passion and commitment, as well as we can see from both our speakers, it is rooted in a sense of social justice. This is not just following international new norms, but it is saying how best can we deploy education for the service of humanity and to see and realize the development aspirations of our continent. Friends, I was taking so much of notes. You guys should have just already assessed us so that we could get our first badges from this seminar. Really congratulations to the two of you. Congratulations for really encouraging us. I feel that we must cancel the December vacations. We should just get straight on to the task. Sam, with your permission, I think we must just get straight on to the task now. Sam agrees. So friends, let's give our keynote speaker, Dr. Denzel Chetty, and our respondent, Ms. Jessica Nell, a round of applause. Well-deserved round of applause. Now, things getting more exciting. You have not just attended. I'm sure you're eager to participate. So we're getting straight into our question and answer session, and we're going to be having Ms. Nokhala, who is going to be moving around with our roving mic to take your questions from those participants seated with us here at the 4th floor Chorong building at the University of South Africa's Makelnek campus. For those of you who are online, we will also be receiving your questions. I also, at this stage, have a list of those who are going to also be commenting. And they indicated that they would love to comment and participate in the session. But to kick us off, are we ready to take your questions? I'm sure you've been documenting a range of your comments and questions. So I would like to call upon our members of UCL who will be assisting us in this process. And so let's get straight on with it. Feel free to raise your hands right up so that we can identify you and get the mic to you as urgently as possible. So let's get moving. Do we have any questions from the floor while those of you online are sending us your questions? Please feel free to get this coming through. We really want to make this as participatory as possible, and together as a community of practice, we want to learn from each other. So let's see where are those hands. We have a hand here.
Thank you, Program Director. Dr. Chetty, I've just got one question for you. Thank you very much for your presentation. I saw your business model. It makes sense, but it's just a request that when you implement it, we must start with the pilot and we see whether it's working, because that's one of our mistakes at UNISA. We get the new intervention, we just roll it out without checking whether it will work or not. It's just the support and the request. Thank you very much.
Shall we take about 3 questions, and then our keynote speaker and respondent can prepare to address them. Let's keep the questions rolling. Please feel free to introduce yourself and then go through with your questions. Do we have any questions from our online participants?
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Emma Tema. I'm from the UCL. And it's so beautiful to see today our speakers talking to the micro-credential. I'm a member of UNISA, my UNISA tax team, and that is supported by the micro-credentials way of doing things. And I heard yourself speaking about badges that you want to attain. From the My UNISA tax team, we've got model cafes running. Colleagues, please attend. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that special announcement. Yes. Right? Colleagues? Yes, Prof, go right ahead. Okay, and then we can get the mic through to Prof for the second question. Yeah. Yes, go right ahead, sir.
Hi, everyone. I'm a student, and mine will be more of a half a testimony of some sort. Then I started with another university. I won't mention it. And I graduated with a BSc degree. And then I got a learnership. And a while ago, we were taken to TUT for a year. Then the idea was after a year we go and work, and then we complete the diploma while we are working. But then while we were working, it was not easy to attend. And the classes were at night. It was far, and it was not safe to travel with the public transport. Okay. One another thing, I represent the students with living with the disabilities. So, okay. Then I decided to come to UNISA to complete my IT. When I got here, then I was told the landscape is not the same. I have to start from scratch. Then, prior, I completed another a program here at UNISA under the camps. Then I tried to talk to the what is it called? CSET, in the School of Computing. And I was told, no. What you have done previously, the recognition of prior learning. It's just a mangal moose. We cannot assist you just start from scratch. So it's been years and years and years. And on a personal level, no, I wouldn't go and do in a postgrad, which I will later self can do another thing. So when I saw this invitation, I got hope that no, and actually at last maybe my issue and it can be listened to, because most of the time you graduate and you are not relevant, and especially in the private sector, or you are. They say you are over qualified. Yeah, and then when you go to the university, you struggle to get the module which the employer is looking for. You are telling them you can do mathematical modeling, and they tell you here we don't do that. Try the stock exchange. You go there, then they say no. Here we just need the PhD students. So I don't know if you can make sense of my yeah. Okay.
And we'll take a question from Prof. Mahashwa, and then our speakers can respond.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. James. I think mine has to do with especially asking from our wonderful representatives that are here from the civil society, government, municipalities, just for them to inform inform us what type of micro-credentials they would like to see UNISA offer. So maybe in the next round of questions and comments, maybe allow them just to make comments as to what type of micro-credentials would they like to see UNISA offer. That's my only comment. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Friends, Prof. Mohashwa has really provided a wonderful opportunity for all our stakeholders across government, business, civil society, and communities of shared practice. Please do engage with us, because at UNISA, we do not exist for our own purposes. We exist to serve you. And if you can give us the impulse that we need to design the courses and the micro-credentials that you require to serve your needs, we would be very happy to explore that. So please consider that, and we will open that round for you. So I'd like to hand over to our speakers, who will then respond to the first round of questions. To all of you across the online platform and in the room, let's prepare more comments and questions so that we can make sure we have high participation and benefit from being with each other. Over to you.
Nice. Okay, thanks, Dr. James. I think for the first question, I see Prof. Nkosi is on the other side, but I think that's one of our challenges, Prof, is that we must have a space to explore a proof of concept. So maybe what we need to do is, even as you start thinking of that first micro-credential in June, we think of how that could be used as a proof of concept to explore the space, and before we start doing mass implementation. So I think that's a very important one. Just quickly to respond to my colleague on the right side, yeah, if we fail our students, we fail. I think that's core business for us as an institution. We can't fail our students. We must start to embrace our students and the challenges. And I think as I listened to what you said, it's actually disappointing, Prof, that we didn't respond the way we should have. And I do apologize for that. But I think what you really noted was that we need to start thinking of the recognition and inclusivity in our designs as well. And that's something we must address, not just in the UCL, but also in the wider university as well. So that's definitely something that we must start taking seriously as an institution. Prof, I think your point is an important one. I'd like to hear that as well in the comments. Dr. James, I saw one comment came up, and it was quite interesting, that I mentioned DED and SACO, which is true, and they cautioned me, please make sure you make mention of CHE as well. So if you are listening to us, yes, I think that's an important one, that CHE must form part of the discussions as well, on quality as well. Thanks.
Thank you. I was just doing a bit of technical problem solving. I saw that the Jamboard was read-only. I've just reshared a link, if that could be posted again. And then let me know, I see in the comments, if it's then editable. Now, I wanted to see, I'm standing on a podium here. I wanted to address your experience, because it's something that I heard from many. And give you some ideas on how this could start to be problem solved. The agingness of a degree versus the agility of a micro-credential. So something that correspondence, open distance education institutions are accused of is the massification of higher education. Offering a standardized degree to hundreds, to thousands, in our case, 400,000 students are receiving our degrees. When what we need to see happening is the customization. And when you consider 400,000 students, how do you customize for 400,000? You can. It's being done in the real world of business all the time. Think of when you go onto a Google platform and you're doing a search. how many of those advertisements are relevant to something you were just discussing or searching the other day? Those are called your cookies. They're tracking your search history. They're picking up your preferences. This is machine learning happening in the background. That is our 4IR that we are living in. So my question is, why can't we use something similar in our education space? Just thinking of our learning management system. Remember those tags and those competencies I was talking about? How many of you knew that you could tag a specific lesson in a module with its themes, with its topics? How many of you knew that you could add your own interests on your profile in the new learning management system? That you could click on those interests and see courses that were offering those interests, people who shared your interests. Right there was an opportunity that we haven't explored yet to network, to build contacts across spaces, across disciplines, across industries, but also to identify modules or possibly down the line micro-credentials that meet your current interests. So when you start to identify in the workplace that you're missing this skill, that maybe there was a job opportunity on LinkedIn that you saw that you've almost got, but maybe there's one or two specific areas you need to brush up on. Wouldn't it be nice to go into your learning management system and add that as your interest and see every single credential that speaks to that interest? So again, the tools are there. We need to learn from industry. We need to take what's seen as an annoyance and leverage it to our advantage. We need to see how students are, and remember, obviously you have to be very secure in doing so as well. Protection of personal information. Please don't forget that. But within a secure space, being able to identify students that are posting complaints, identify students who are asking about specific skills they need, and have a very easy advertising cookie-informed bar to pull from the system and say, hey, this micro-credential at the UCL is going to fit your needs exactly as you need it. And again, remember that analogy of the tree. Strip it down to the trunk. For me, longer degrees, they need to be formed from the information that barely changes. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I come from a chem space as well. Things that don't change so much over time. And then these additional little modules, they need to be the movable, the agile, so that you're not left behind. But thank you.
Our questions are coming in from our online participants. Thank you so much for that. Also, I'm not sure whether you noticed, we have Dr. Patricia Hoos, who said she's willing to offer her robotics program for a pilot. So we already have volunteers who want to pilot. Dr. Hoos, the House is really applauding your willingness. Now, colleagues, some questions from our online participants. The first one comes from Mr. Daya Sudat, and his question is, would the solution not lie in addressing micro-credentials to articulate with and of macro-credentials, that is the formal credits? I've mailed these questions to both of you as well. Question 2 is from the question is one assessment enough for assessing the students? So just how many assessments do we need? And that's from Nkwana MJ. The third question is from Louis. Do you think micro-credentials will not replace formal academic certificates? If they do, for instance, what be the purpose of the formal degrees then? And then we have a fourth question from David. Is there a space to engage with professional bodies like the Engineering Council of South Africa and others? And how would this interface look? Thank you so much to those participants for their questions. And so we'd like to ask those in the house to also prepare your questions and keep them ready as we hand over to our speakers to respond to the first four. I can even leave the questions out here for you here. So you can just tap it so that it doesn't.
Thanks, Dr. James. Yeah, I think the first one from Daya Sudat. Thanks for watching, Daya. I know you're always engaging us with these critical questions. Would the solution not lie in addressing micro-credentialing to articulate with and of macro-credentials? I think that's an important one, Prof, because in many cases, the SLPs should be a way for students to get into the system. It should be designed that way. And maybe going back to Jessica's points earlier is how do we repackage what we already have? But I think in addition to should it be addressing or articulating with and macro credentials, I think it's a way for us to also grow the disciplines within the university. I think that's an important part that I would like to raise. There are, and I think Daya has raised an important point when we think of financial viability of some of our disciplines, that are at the point of low student enrollments. This could be a way to bring those students in by creating those creative, innovative part of with. But I think in addition to that, that's one part of it, but in addition to that, we should also have not forget the responsiveness to industry as well when it comes to this just-in-time skills. The second question, and then I think Jessica can answer the other two, the one on, is one assessment enough for assessing the students? I think it's not about the number of assessments, but it's about the competencies that we are assessing. I think that's an important point, is that if we say we are just doing one assessment, it's a matter of how are we assessing the competencies that are built into it. So for example, it not necessarily have one particular essay writing, for example, on an assessment. A competency can be even based in a portfolio of evidence submitted. So I think we must shift it to what are we actually assessing as opposed to quantifying the assessments. We need to think of the competencies that are being assessed as part of this, because at the end of the day, it's not just the assessment that comes out, it's the competencies that are validated by micro-credentials. Thanks.
Thank you, Denzel. And I do very, very strongly agree with you on the assessment side of things. Remember what I was talking about with what's the value to you as a student? An exam doesn't really add much value in the workplace other than that accreditation. But your organic portfolio of evidence that can evolve over time with your learning and your understanding that you could possibly link to in a digital badge as evidence for your potential employers to verify for themselves. That's something else. And that actually brings me to question 3, is from Louis. Do you think micro-credentials will not replace formal academic certificates? If they do, what would be the purpose of having a formal degree? So, micro-credential, it's like a cake. I had the tree analogy. It's the ingredients. It's one component. It's the flavors. It's the nuts. It's the flour. Everything can be drilled down, right down to an elemental level. So your formal degree still has a place. You've heard my opinions on it. I think we need to stop building so many formal degrees because it gets harder and harder to map to those degrees if you do. So we just see this trend of, now I'm going to offer a business management degree, but specializing in marketing, but specifically in communications, no, but specifically in personal brand communications, no, but it's actually about an online personal brand. Where does it end? My point being, those formal qualifications have their place, There is an entire ecosystem. One does not need to kill the other, but they need to evolve. And we've seen that playing out through history. This focus on a piece of paper as a symbol of all your hard work and blood and sweat and tears over time, it's a piece of paper. It's literally just a symbol. What does it matter what the symbol is used? If you have a digital credential, it's still a symbol. Only thing is we've now got the technology to tell you a little bit more with that symbol, and that we can actually evolve the contents hosted within that symbol. So everything has its place, maybe in a slightly transformed way. Then from David, and I also saw in the chat here just now about being able to get involved with industry. And David's was also, is there space for professional bodies like the Engineering Council of South Africa and others? How would this interface look? I think this might be best for you, Prof, especially coming from, or you, Sam, coming from the UCL. But for me, I think that UNISA's centers are actually where it needs to be happening. Our lifelong learning spaces is where we need to have those discussions. I can speak from prior experience where the only way we would get some industry insight was through our markers, our tutors, the people that were actually in the space. And recent developments made me worry about that a bit. So we need these focused spaces, lifelong learning, the centers, the SBL, where industry can come. But we need to reach out to industry. We can't sit and wait for them only to come to us. So we need to get into that space. We need to constantly communicate. We need to say, we want to develop this credential. Can we get you on board and reach out? Okay, so that's me.
Our online participants are burning the platform. They are so eager. There have been very, very excellent suggestions coming online. We see Roots, HJL. We should facilitate a multi-stakeholder working session to develop a strategic response framework with workplaces. Prof, what more can we ask for? I think we have to cancel the holidays and get on with the work. So friends, we also have participants who've had their hands up on the platform. So I'd like to say to our speakers, our team will allow us to hear directly from our participants on the platform. So are we ready? And then you can respond. Our online participants to share their questions. We have two more questions. One from Zone. Do micro-credentials have relevance and applicability in the development context? The next one from Q de Kock. How can industry contact, or rather, who can industry contact to become part of this initiative, even providing use case possibilities? So we could have case studies from industry. Feel free to contact our UNISA Center for Lifelong Learning. We want to keep the conversation going, and we will be able to provide you all of those details. Google, reach out to the UNISA Center for Lifelong Learning. We do not want the conversation to end here. So colleagues, please feel free to continue your questions and reaching out so that we can document this and develop that plan to work together. So colleagues, Do we have any hands still up from our online platform? We have another hand.
Can I start this?
Yes, are we good to go? Okay, let's just take our online participant. So feel free to introduce yourself. And
Lumkile Lale. And using those particular routes and the percentage of that, and which to a large extent I see resistance from institutions to actually embrace the policy frameworks that have been created. I think the typical example is the colleague that mentioned his struggles as a student in trying to actually deal with issues of articulation and bringing prior learning into the system and be accommodated in programs. I'll stop there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I think that's a very important one. We need to, in response to that question, I think let me start with this first. We had a strategic planning session with the directorate, or department, last week, was it last week Friday or last week Wednesday? And Brighton Masia told us that in terms of UNISA's throughput rate, 3 out of 10 students that register walk the graduation stage. My question is, what happens to the other 7? If 3 out of 10 that register only walk the graduation stage, and then maybe and this is my point, is that maybe we need to rethink that, because if those 7 could have successfully exited with a certificate level, it would have meant their studies is not done in vain. And I think that's where we need to get to as an institution, is thinking of our throughput rate, thinking of what works. And I think we must have that national conversation, is what works for our students, what works in our country. Because the fact that students can spend 2 years in a system and drop off and then don't qualify with a degree after, with 1 more year left over, I mean, that's sad. So we really need to be responsive to our challenges in our country. And I think maybe the conversation needs to happen at a different level. And maybe, Prof, from your office, Prof, we could drive this. And I know the VC was very adamant about this, that we rethink this as an institution as well, specifically coming from the fact that we have such dropout rates, is why can't we allow our students to qualify after that year with the minimum that they've graduated? And I think that's an important one for us. The fact that it worked before, maybe we need to actually look at the data if it worked before. But I think for us as an institution, from UNISA's perspective, is we cannot allow 7 students out of that 10 to walk away with nothing. I think that's irresponsible for us as an institution. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think we had another question here.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Dinao Diale. I'm a lecturer at Rhodes University, but I'm doing my PhD with UNISA. I've got two questions, but the other one I will just leave it out because it's linked, I think, to Prof. Mohasha's question regarding the linkage. My particular question is to the presenters. So particularly on the collaboration, and thank you so much for the very informative presentation. So particularly on the collaborations between the universities, is there any best practices that has been tried and tested that can actually foster that relationship or that linkage where a UNISA student can also have access to another university's content and vice versa? Thank you.
Now, we have another two questions, and then we would ask all our stakeholders in government, civil society, and business to please share with us what do you desire in terms of micro-credentials. So we'll take the last two questions and we'll move to the next round. Over to you, ma'am.
Good morning. My name is Moronga, and I have a comment. I'm so excited about this micro-credentials because with me, I had to drop out of university because I was sick, you know, and it was my first year and I was doing well, and it looked like it was just over for me for those years. And I met online, I searched and I found that I could do micro-credential courses and I got badges and I was into business. My parents were doing agriculture and I learned a lot from there. I learned a lot that I could go into the renewable space, renewable energy space, and I now went into business, and from those courses, I learned how I could make it better for my parents, because my parents were using the traditional ways. Then I went into technology and started introducing steel tunnels, green tunnels into the business. And I started to see that, because when they were doing it, I didn't want to do that. And I started to see that waste to energy, because they were using waste as manure. And I started seeing that as I could do that. And I went into other spaces of energy. And now I'm into this business because of the credentials I learned online. And I'm so excited that people now can do it here in South Africa through UNISA. Thank you.
Wow. What a great testimony. Yes, sir?
Morning, everybody. Is it morning? No, I'm still relevant, still morning. My name is Victor Mariba. I'm attached to the city of Tshwane. And my designation is a senior specialist dealing with counselor, capacity building and training. But my background before I joined the city, I'm a teacher by profession. I graduate from the so-called Bush universities. If you don't know Bush universities today, we are talking Fort Hare, KZN. We're talking University of the North. That's Teflop. I'm from Teflop. So I joined the teaching fraternity in Mpumalanga in a high school in 1992. Then I worked as a teacher. Then I left the high school and joined a primary school, because there was always this argument that those who are at the high school, they will keep on saying, the teachers who are at the primary school are doing nothing. Yeah. And that's why our kids are failing. Those who are lecturing, they will keep on saying, the teachers who are at high school, They are not giving these children proper education. That's why they cannot finish their degrees. Then I decided to join the primary school to see what is happening there. And really I got to know what is happening there. Then thereafter, around 2004, I then joined the district to assist the teachers themselves. Because teachers will always say, those who are subject advisors, they are not doing a good job. They are not assisting, they are not capacitating us. So I wanted also to go and see what is happening at the district offices. Then I was fortunate. I served since 2004 until 2014. Then I joined the municipality. And then I also find out why we don't have service delivery. Can I tell you, I regard myself as very fortunate to have moved to all those areas and finally find myself really, we are in the darkness as we speak. Dustbins are not collected. Now, we've got serious challenges, and we do have people with real qualifications. That really, I can tell you, my qualification from TEFLOP, it has no bearing now. It has no bearing, but it has assisted me to be where I am. But the reality is, what we are talking about today is more relevant. We need people who have multi-skills. We don't longer need people who are vertically, they simply goes up, 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 up. But there are certain small things that they cannot do. Since I was with the municipality, yes, I tried to liaise with almost all the universities in South Africa. I always wonder, why do we have so many universities and have such a huge percentage of unemployment? Are we really, really, really providing the correct education? South Africa has a lot of institutions. We've got UJ, we've got VETS, we've got UP, we've got TUT, we've got UNISA here. We've got a number of technical colleges, but we still have a high number of unemployment. Something is not right. Something is not right. I think the micro-credential programs that we really need to come up with, they need to be very smart. They need to be very specific. They need to address specific issues. But the courses that I'm dealing not with the staff in city of Tshwane, let me be very specific. Tshwane is very big. We've got an academy that is known as Tshwane Management and Development Academy. Now it deals specifically with the employee development. I'm dealing with the councillor development, and that responsibility resides in the office of the chief whip. Now for me, the courses that could at least assist us, let's take into account the municipality is not that stable. Now, going to give them a 6 months or a 3 months course, it's gonna not assist. When the person finish, already has been voted out. He's been voted out, so now that particular course might not assist. Now, if we come up with even a course that will take 5 days, won't assist us as a municipality. At least a program that is specific that could take 2.5 days will definitely, that's what we'll need. We've got a different number of departments. Maybe to give you a highlight where we need assistance. We need courses that will assist. We've got what we call Section 79 committees. And then we've got MMCs. Then we've got chairpersons of committees. Now, those are the people that need to be assisted, because mostly they do what we call an oversight work. Now, they need to know if there's a road that is going to be built. Road and Transport Department needs to know exactly what is that they need to go and do oversight on. Now, those are the courses that will assist us. If we get such courses, they will have a document that will at least, I still remember this year I've spoken with the UNISA enterprise. I've discussed with Professor Nyoni, if I'm not mistaken. I said to him, can UNISA develop a practical project management program? It must not be too academic. So I was just trying to say, but if it could be something that when all these committees, they are going to do service delivery oversight, they will be having something that they will look at and know exactly what is that they're expected to do. And they can have a feedback report thereafter. Now, the challenge is UNISA have tried to develop that program, but come I tell you, the program was not affordable. It was not affordable because it was around 950,000 possibly. And to me, when you present that, you need to be really sure and tell the city manager, this is going to assist us. But now it's also too long. Now, when you enroll those people in that particular program, whereas currently this person is an MMC, and then it happens that, remember, Tswane, it's a reality, there's a coalition government, and it's very unstable. Now you need to not to have long program that will definitely not assist. So I think let me just stop there, because there's a lot that I wanted to say.
Right. We have more questions coming from the floor, and the program today is just heating up by the moment. Let's hear from you. Yes, go right ahead, sir.
Thank you. My name is Sikudlo. From what Ndate has just said there, I just picked up a few things which I'm very interested in. I'm not sure if our academics are part of the program today, because I think it will actually, what Dr. Chetty has just presented is actually more relevant to our academics in terms of how they should actually go about developing programs that will actually speak to what is currently needed in the market. I'm not sure, I just forgot his name.
Mr. Mariba.
Yes, Mr. Mariba. He's just mentioned a very important point that they have a certain shortage of skills, but they are struggling to find those offerings. So it's very important that when our academics develop programs, they should actually offer what is needed in the market. And not only that, but he's also talking about affordability, which is another important factor. And another thing that I would just like to, it speaks to business initiatives, where we should actually go out in the market to actually find out what all these other organizations are, which skills they are looking for, so that we can offer those skills based on their needs. But I've got a question to Dr. Chetty. I'm struggling to understand the distinction between SLPs and micro-credentials offerings. Just to give us clear distinction there. I understand that the time frame in terms of offering SLPs, our SLPs are from 6 months to 12 months. So I just want to understand more on the micro-credentials in terms of the distinction between the two, so that I just want to understand if we will have a situation where we will have micro-credentials competing against SLPs within the same organization, so that we, in terms of going forward, we just understand what the distinction is between the two offerings. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We'll take 2 more questions from the floor and then over to our speakers.
Good afternoon. My name is Nico Bakubele. I'm a director at Business Worth Consulting and currently a master's student here at UNISA. I see academics are not so popular this afternoon, but anyway, just 2 questions. The first one would be I did some courses some years ago with the Center for Business Management. Those years, the concept of micro-credentials, as it's clearly defined today, had not been defined. But I would like to know if there's a strategic difference in approach between what the Center for Business Management offered back then and what the approach would be today offered by the Center for Lifelong Learning. That's number one. Number two, I just want to find out also in terms of your national qualifications framework. These micro-credentials, are they NQF aligned at particular levels, which is, I think it's important because when you go to industry, at times they would want to know if you gained or acquired a particular skill, at least at what level of the NQF framework is it? Last one would be to see how this micro-credential approach that you're talking about today can perhaps be integrated with what the sitters do. For example, some of the sitter accredited providers like us would provide what we call portable skills in certain skills areas. Your construction sitter, for example, would be able to develop a plumber probably within a space of a month or 2. And when that learner exits that setup, at least it's in a position to can be able to go and market and find work elsewhere. I'm just intrigued as to how what we're discussing today could be linked with that. Thank you very much.
Good morning, colleagues. My name is Nomi Mnotoza. I am the UNISA employee, and then I work in the Sustainability Monitoring and Evaluation Directorate. Mine is not a question, but a comment. I would like to say congratulations to UCL, to the VP Teaching and Learning. It has been a long way. I used to work in that office, and then back then it used to be a wish list. Today, 2022, in December, we are celebrating the UCL, the Come Alive UCL. I'm part of you guys. Thank you so much.
What greater gift can we ask for UCL? I think our colleagues at UCL deserve a round of applause. Our academic planner, Prof. Mahashwa, for the impetus and the drive he's given. This is really, really special. Sir, Mr. Modiba, Mariba, yeah. Mr. Mariba, and the colleagues who've been asking their questions, the more you are exploring the very aspects of micro-credentialing, the more we are realizing how critically urgent this is. And this is not just a lifeline or a new-found sense of hope for millions of South Africans and for the continent of Africa. It is also to ensure that we have support at the system and structural level, right from city municipalities, across the health sector, across the engineering sectors, across business and the economy, across social justice that civil societies are rallied around. My greatest concern is that by the year 2050, the African population would have doubled. We are currently just over 1 billion people. We will be over 2 billion people in just a couple of decades. The lion's share of our population are gravitating towards our cities. There are huge urban agglomerations forming across the continent. No longer do we see the big distances between cities. Cities are literally merging into each other to create these huge urban agglomerations. And indeed, sir, as Mr. Mariba has pointed out, we have this crisis of unemployment. Despite the fact that we have these huge people movements to our cities are incapable of providing the labor opportunities required. So it will take nothing short of a very robust partnership between higher education, between the post-school education and training sector, between basic education and cities across the continent in order for us to provide these labor opportunities. Otherwise, we're going to see the wealth of Africa, which is our youth, left in a category called the NEETs. Not in employment, not in education, and not in training. And this is crisis. We should be working at this with full speed. All the help that we should afford our city municipalities to think and dream and create the cities for the African continent that will provide the relevant opportunities we should provide without haste. So, sir, thank you for bringing this to the top of our consciousness. Indeed, we are in what they call it in soccer, injury time. Injury time, and we need to act fast because the clock is ticking. And so over to our speakers to handle the final round of questions, and then we're going to leave it over to you for responses. What kind of micro-credentials do we need in your sectors and in the spaces you work in? Over to you, our speakers.
Thanks, Dr. James. Just two responses from me, and then I'll hand over to Jessica. The first one on the national qualifications, I think that's an important one. And Prof. Makasho and Mr. Sampakana, I think what we need to do maybe is, as part of what is also echoed on the chat, is to start being inclusive with the people that we approach, key stakeholders. And I'm thinking, for example, as you mentioned, the CETAs are quite an important one as we start think of industry. But I'm also thinking of, for example, teachers with SAYS accreditation points, professional development points that comes into play. So our micro-credentials must find that place that has that collaboration. So I think that's an important one. But it goes back to my further point, I think, which I emphasized in the presentation. We need a national conversation around this. And that's an imperative that we must. And maybe as UNISA, we can be strategic and pioneer the discussions at the national level as well. The first point, I think that the question of yours was quite an important one, the distinction between micro-credentials and SLPs. And I think to respond to that is the point of fit for purpose. What's the purpose of each one of those? And I think, as you rightfully pointed out, the SLPs are much longer in terms of length, but in terms of longer in terms of length, but remember it'll also be in terms of cost efficiency, in terms of the competencies that I built, as opposed to a micro-credential which is shorter quick knowledge transfer. The competencies are lesser, easily evaluated, but also the point of cost may come in as well. So those are the distinctions that you want. I don't see it as being a competing paradigm. I see it as being an augmenting, supplementing of where we want to be as an institution. And I also think that those two will be the SLPs together with micro-credentials may just position us, give us that edge that we want back again in the space of industry, in the space of social upliftment, social justice, etc., by combining both these needs, because both clearly has a distinct purpose on each one of it. Thanks.
My brother and sister went to Rhodes, so you've got a bit of a special place in my heart there, Grahamstown. It's the home of the creatives. From a collaboration standpoint, and I think Dr. Chetty touched on it, and you've touched on it as well with our qualifications framework. Who holds the information about the competencies for every module, the competencies for a program? Where is it hosted? It's in SAQA. So from my perspective, we need them as a key player to help facilitate inter-university conversation. Otherwise, we're going to carry on competing with each other, and we can't. Again, we're not here, we're not businesses. We're here for humanity. So we can, in our own spaces, I think the UCL is a wonderful space to actually start facilitating and hosting that conversation. But I know of other spaces where we do have these types of conversations. Sadie, SUNY, we have also OER Africa. They're already offering micro-credentials and they're in open learning. The people are there. Helm, UCDP, it is happening. So we just need a way to consolidate and bring all of us together to collaborate, because if there's something that we really need to agree on is the framework to host all of this, to host a micro-credential, a nano-credential, an open badge, a formal qualification, to host that whole credentialing landscape that's going to allow students to articulate where they need to in an agile way. So for me, I'm speaking to government, DHCHE, SAQA. Please, we need you to be our flagship to host us all and to engage conversation. Thanks.
I'm Tola. Good afternoon, colleagues, once again. Let me respond on the question that relates to CBM and CITAS, but my colleagues have already touched on the issue of CITAS and how we need to collaborate with these regulatory bodies. But of importance is that we need to then identify micro-credentials and SLPs that we offer and be able to link them to a specific SITA so that when we engage, we know that we are addressing that specific market that relates to that particular SLP. And then when it comes to CBM colleagues, yes, some of them are alumni of CBM. I'm also an alumni of CBM. What we have done, colleagues, is that we have amalgamated all these centers. As I've said in my presentation, that we had different centers in different colleges. So what we have done is to amalgamate them into one administrative hub to focus on the support for those students that are studying through those particular colleges. Whilst the academics in various colleges are involved in research, community engagement, teaching and learning, and quality assurance. So basically, UCL took all those SLPs that used to be offered in various centers, amalgamated them into one UNISA Center for Lifelong Learning. That is how we've defined ourselves in terms of making sure that we maintain, the university vision as far as lifelong learning is concerned. Because what we've noted is that in some of the colleges, there was lack of administrative support, wherein academics were involved in, student inquiries, were involved in managing finances, were involved, in doing administrative functions. Then the university took a decision, a strategic decision for that matter, that in order to support academics, let's then centralize the administrative component of managing short learning programs. So meaning that we work collaboratively with the colleges because we cannot, there's nothing that we can do without colleges. So colleges are our actually our specific strategic partners. Colleagues, I cannot overemphasize the importance of industry, that when we conceptualize our qualifications and short learning programs, they should be informed by the industry need. They should be informed by the professional bodies. What we're also doing through one of our projects that was initiated by Prof. Mohashwa, that when you look at the articulation process, we are asking questions from our academics that when you conceptualize this short learning program, is it aligned to a particular SETA? Is it aligned to a particular professional body? Is it able to benefit the student from, acquiring CPD points? And Dr. Chetty here said that in terms of SACE, for example, when you look at our qualifications from the College of Education, they gain points after completing a particular qualification because they've got an agreement. The College of Education has got an agreement with SACE that on completion of a particular qualification, those candidates are able to receive points in terms of, those qualifications that they've completed. So that on its own is also a marketing element that when we advertise our short learning programs, we are then able to say, on completion of this particular short learning program, candidates will be able to receive 30 points or 45 CPD points. So that's the space that we want to grow into, because not all colleges are involved with various professional bodies. So what we've done as part of this project is that we're identifying all the short learning programs in, for example, a College of Accounting Sciences, and we're saying that this short learning program can be linked to SAIGA or to any other professional body in that specific discipline. Then we're then engaging with that particular professional body to ensure that when we redesign and quality assure our programs, those professional bodies are able to make inputs in terms of making sure that our SLPs are relevant to the market and they meet the specific needs of various professional bodies, so that our students can not only just receive a paper, but they can receive something that is worth, taking to the market and being able to advance their skills and be able to advance their careers, So on that note, colleagues, we are indeed engaged in this journey, making sure that our SLPs get the recognition they deserve. Thank you very much.
Now, we're going to have some special comments from our stakeholders, but before we do, I want to encourage those participants on the chat to please indicate the kinds of micro-credentials you would need in your space. Let's collate a good, strong list of the areas that we need to explore with regards to micro-credentialing. And then we'd like to open up the floor for some responses from our stakeholders on what are your needs? What do you need in your space? We've been hearing across those participants online and on site the kinds of micro-credentials that are needed. Let's give a final opportunity for us to cohere these responses so that we can develop a plan of action. So, colleagues, if you could just introduce yourselves and then indicate the sector that you are from and what are your needs. For those on the chat, feel free to document that on the chat as well. Yes, let's get the mic moving. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. My name is Moses Kutu. I come from the DPSA. DPSA is for Department of Public Service and Administration. Our mandate is to develop policy for the entire public service, both provincial and national departments. So I would like to see more courses that are, or programs that are customized to customize towards the work that we are doing as a department. Because we have bursaries. Unfortunately, I sit in the bursary committee. But most of the applications that we receive are people wanting to do degrees and postgraduates and, you know, and not saying anything about the work that they are doing. I'll give an example. I come from the Ethics and Integrity Unit. Our main focus is the code of conduct for the public service. Even now, we don't have a document that we can say is our code of conduct. And to ensure that people behave accordingly, we need that document. And we don't only need it for senior management, we need it for everybody. I'd be happy if we can maybe work together and see how you can also assist us towards that directions. And it's not only about the code of conduct. We also deal with, if you have been watching the space recently, there is a lot of talk about the lifestyle audit. We also deal with lifestyle audits. And this is something that we have to roll out to the entire public service, up to the lowest level employees, so that they can understand what is this lifestyle audit and why did it come about. There's a lot that we can work together to ensure that we assist developing policies is also, we will also need to have some skills towards that, because we're responsible for all the policies. And if myself, I'm not able to develop, I don't have those skills, it is going to be difficult. And remember, we don't only develop, we must develop and implement and also monitor those policies. So I think we can also have a conversation beyond this forum today. Thank you.
Exceptional input and a lot of food for thought. Definitely a need for support in the policy development area, and if it can benefit the public service, then the whole nation benefits. Thank you for that input, sir. I'd like to hand over now to some of our stakeholders who have indicated that they would like to make some comments. I want to just say to you all, you've been an exceptional group participating both online and on site. This has been so rich. Mr. Sam Kekana had to actually remind me that we should start winding down to complete, because I was ready to just carry on for the rest of the day, because you all seem so eager. So we would love to invite our stakeholders now to share with us. Mr. Mariba, I'm not sure, sir, if you want to add anything at this stage, you want to take us further. We also have Mr. Tuso Mabuta from the EDP CETA. And sir, you can please make sure that you prepare yourself. We would love to hear your contributions. Followed by Muranwa Mutele from I Am She. And then we also have representatives from our National Students Representative Committee, our NSRC. So colleagues, in that order, if we could hear your input, we would appreciate it. Over to you, sir. think if you can come up so our participants online can also see you. Mr. Mariba is from the city of Tshwane. Let's welcome him once more.
Phew. This thing, I don't know whether I'm too long or I'm too short. Yeah, I've already said a lot, but there's one other program that I would love to see being also developed. We are struggling with consequence management. And I think we do lip service, almost all the departments. Can we come up with a program on consequence management? That's one. Programs that we would love to see, as I've already indicated, when they were presenting, when Dr. Chetty was presenting, he talks of small. And if we could really have such programs that will address the issues in the municipality, issues related to road and transport. If we could get such programs that will definitely assist us to assist councillors who sits in the committee, road and transport. We are struggling with, we have indicated that people are moving from other areas, they are moving towards the urban areas. We need to also look at programs that will address economic development and spatial planning. We've got people who have just put their houses under this, what do you call this, electricity pilot, where a person simply build anywhere. And there's no education towards that. And we know very well that as a municipality, there are also certain things that as the political parties in South Africa are doing, when we want to lure the voters, we simply say, you can go and occupy that land, irrespective of whether the land is suitable for that. And 2 years down the line, we see horrible things happening. We see people building their houses in wetlands, people building their houses where there's no even an infrastructure. We have seen in Soweto, now there are floods as we speak. Houses have been destroyed because they have been built in areas that are not supposed to be there. If we could have programs that will definitely also assist us in that area, I think we will at least get somewhere. There's littering in this country. It's a huge problem. We need to come up with programs that will assist us to deal with littering. If you go to Mamelodi, there's a landfill there. Before you reach the landfill, a landfill already started along the road. Before you reach there, in the landfill, there's a landfill along the road. We need programs that will also address such issues. And I've learned when I went to the landfill last time, hey, there's money there. In the landfill, there's money. Money is lying around. And it is taken by people who are not supposed to take the money. There's money in the landfill. A lot of money. It's filthy, but there's money there. So we need educations around how to deal with the issues of how to manage the landfills correctly. Then the other issue, we are all sitting, we are all in this city known as Pretoria, Tshwane. We even go around and joke about the homeless people. We say, these ones, they sleep here. You know, you can't sleep at Hatfield under the bridge, but they sleep there. They don't have a medical aid. They exchange needles. We see them. We need programs that will assist this to deal with these social ills, the issue of drugs. It's very important that we look at that. I think we are not saying we need to, we no longer need the degrees, we still need them. But we need to do a research and know that if this person completes this degree, we need to move away from doing qualifications and with the intention of going to look for a job. We need to do qualifications that come up with qualification as higher institutions, qualifications that will assist people not to talk the language of looking for a job, not telling a person about the Z83 form. Colleagues, you cannot do a master's degree and still wants to go and complete a Z83 and look for a job. When you do a master's degree, it means there's a niche somewhere that we have seen. There's an opportunity that we want to address. You cannot be doing a qualification and then go and blame other people that they are not providing you with jobs. We need to rethink the way we do things. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for the lovely presentations. My name is Morongwa Mutere. I am representing IMC. Just a little bit background about what IMC is. IMC is a non-profit organization, a non-profit company, and a public beneficiary organization. I am the chairperson. I have my colleagues there with me, Caroline and Gertrude. What we do at IMC is we bridge the gap between the equality in education where boys and girls receive the amount of education. So we understand that there are certain needs that girls need or resources that they need to go to school or end up having an equal education as to their male counterparts. I'm also a TEDx speaker, a published TEDx speaker, and amongst other things, I wish someone had given me a short learning program or a micro-credential about standing in front of people and speaking before I went and presented my TED talk, because it is important to understand that certain skills you need to have, like the skill of writing an email. We receive many emails from a lot of volunteers. They'll just say, I want to volunteer. That we need a skill. You need to understand when you say you want to volunteer to our organization, why do you want to volunteer? How are you going to convince us to accept you into our volunteering program? So we understand that a lot of people don't have the skill to write a basic email, to even write a basic curriculum vitae. So to comment on the micro credentials, Jessica said it should accommodate an average person. But what is an average person? An average person in this case should be the student. It should be for it to be accommodative to an average person, it should be transparent. Gone are the days where you have your degree and you go look for a job. We need to tell our students that you need more than a degree. We need to teach them that having a degree, for instance, I'm doing a degree in philosophy, politics and economics. I'm still studying. So I understand that there are certain skills that I have to have in order to enter the entry level of a workspace. Whether it's coding, some people don't even know what coding is. So where are the skills? We need short learning courses for coding. What else? Application, it should be relevant to the new age. We talk about the metaverse, but is it relevant to South Africa and to our need? We are still living in the third industrial revolution. Let's not talk about the fourth industrial revolution. We are not there yet. It's good on paper, yes. We can talk that fourth industrial revolution, it's not just Instagram, it's not Facebook. That we're not going to get jobs by knowing how to post. We need to address the need for skills within the third industrial revolution that people are using. Many companies are still stuck within the third industrial revolution. We need to understand the need for robotics before we even bridge the gap for the fourth industrial revolution. That means we need to introduce courses, micro-credentials that are short. Here's a story that I'd like to share with you. When we were doing this organization, when we started this organization, we wanted to do a website. So to do a website, you have to have max 25K to find a website developer and someone that will run you through everything. So because I'm a jack of all trades, I love to do things. I said, okay, I'll take this skill. I will do the website myself. Mid doing the website, I realized that I don't have the coding skills. So I go on my laptop, search how to code. Then millions and millions of coding courses show up. So I have 1 hour to finish this website. So I just click on one that is very, very informative. Then within an hour, I got my coding skills. They were basic, but they were important. So we have to have programs that are short, fast, and on need. So I have to go on I have to be able to click on my phone and get that micro-credential on point on that time. It doesn't have to take 5 hours. 5 hours is a lot. We are dealing with TikTok girls, TikTok boys. We need to be honest. Our minds are now accustomed to 7 seconds videos. We can't talk about 10 hours papers, 10 hours things. We won't get it. We're going to look at, it's boring. We need fast things. We call it fast fashion, but it must be like that. Fast technology, fast credentials. And be able to show up to it. Google has credentials where you learn things, and in order to get your certificate, you have to pay. So for me, let's say I'm unemployed. I don't have money to be able to pay. UNISA must be able to dismantle its education system and introduce these credentials as a way of, if you're going to graduate, you have to have these credentials because they're important. You're not going to get a job without these credentials. Whether it's standing up and speaking, management, the smallest managements, you need to have them. So dismantling the academic system. Gone are the days of ENG, ENF 103. We don't need those. I'm talking because I'm a UNISA student. They are important, but we don't necessarily need them. We need things that work and will equip us to enter level head or entry level spaces. So that's it. Thank you.
This girl is on fire. Thank you so much, Murunwa. Really, we appreciate that. A necessary wake-up call to the realities out there. Our final comment, ladies and gentlemen, is going to come from Mr. Tuso Mabuta, and he is online. Can we connect to Mr. Tuso? He is from the EDP CETA. Okay, I think we will have to hear from Mr. Tuso another time. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. What an inspiring morning we've spent together. We are so energized now. Honestly, I really feel like there's so much work ahead of us. Thank you for your very, very quality input and your enthusiasm to be part of this necessary exploration. I need to say that we all have our part to play. One of the things that the SDG points out, we have 17 goals, but the 17th goal is the goal which requires partnerships. Nothing else can be achieved without these strong partnerships. So whether it be in enhancing the quality of education or improving our efforts in economic development, which we will still hold our cities and government responsible for, so that we can make more and more South Africans and the people of our continent have sustainable access to our economy without all the red tape, and so that we can ensure that the entrepreneurial skills of our continent is fully realized into a stronger economy. Whether it is the removal of refuse, we know that there are strong divides that exist in our continent. When we look at Alexandra Township and we look at Santon, who are neighboring communities, one community does not have adequate refuse removal, while another community next door has refuse removal inadequacy and service delivery access in that regard. And so, through our efforts together, through these robust partnerships across government, business, civil society, our cities, all of our seaters, across the higher education, basic education sector, and across the post-school education training sector, we can build and craft the Africa that we desire. We don't have to wait for others to create it for us. And so, thank you for your rich contributions. You have our commitment as UNISA that we are your fellow travelers and partners in the realization of the development aspirations of our cities, our communities, our provinces, and our continent. And so, with that being said, today we want to pay very special tribute to our guest speakers, our keynote address from Dr. Denzel Chetty, and our respondent, Ms. Jessica Nell. We want to honor you for spending this time preparing the rich content, really catapulting all of us into such a wonderful discussion, which will continue from here on. And so I'd like to call upon Prof. Humphrey Mohashwa, as well as our director, Mr. Sam Kekana, to give you a special gift for your hard work and to show you we appreciate you. Over to you, Prof.
Colleagues, it was a wonderful morning. Let me allow Mr. Kekana to, as the acting director of UCL, to be the one that presents these gifts. Mr. Kekana, please. I think, do we have the cordless mic? Then he can do it from there, if it's fine. I think you can just announce to whom you are presenting.
On behalf of UCL, Prof. Nkosi,
thank you very much for being in our program and opening the event for us. We really appreciate. You are always available to support UCL, we know. Thank you very much. Dr. Chetty, thank you. Dr. Chetty, thank you very much for presenting this valuable information to the team. We really appreciate, much appreciated. Even next time, when we call upon you to come and assist, please do so. I think we've got work ahead of us, you know, in terms of the information that we have shared. We really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Nell, thank you very much. Thank you very much, ma'am. We really appreciate for responding to Dr. Chetty's presentation. In future, when we call you, please avail yourself again. Thank you very much.
There's one more. They would like also to present flowers to our program director, Dr. James. Please, may you, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me reveal the secret. You know, when Prof asked me who is going to be our program director, there's only one person that I thought of, and she's sitting in front of us. Madam Dr. Genevieve, thank you very much for directing our program. Thank you very much for adding value into our program by sharing the knowledge and insight that we have. We really appreciate that. And I know that you are an excellent program director. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much for directing our program.
Yes. Thank you so much, Mr. Gegana, for those presentations. Colleagues, I'm only going to do closing remarks. First and foremost, we would like to thank you, the audience. Here in the function hall, our target was 200 people, and we have done well to reach close to that number. Thank you so much. Our online target has exceeded the target by yesterday. It was 500. And so there are a lot of people online, more than in the hall, attending this event. So please, let's clap our hands to appreciate our audience that is online. Our audience is civil society, government, private sector, municipalities, entrepreneurs, NPOs, persons in their personal capacities, UNISA staff. From UNISA staff, we have support staff, professional staff, academics, and also we are pleased to see even the professors that develop the SLPs who are also going to assist to develop the micro credentials. They are here, the UNISA National SRC, and also the regions that are supporting us. May we please clap hands for all the categories that are here. Second, would like to thank Professor Zetungosi, the Acting Executive Dean of the College of Human Sciences, for the opening address and for also interfacing the industry and the university in your address. May we give her a warm round of applause. Thirdly, would like to thank Mr. Kekana, the Acting Director of UNISA Center for Lifelong Learning, for his vibrant leadership. A leader that is not vibrant is dull, kills the morale of a unit, of a department, of an institution. The quality and character of a leader does matter a lot. So thank you, Mr. Kekana, for the energy you have demonstrated. We appreciate it. Fourthly, we'd like to thank Dr. Denzel Chetty. Thank you so much for giving us a good presentation whereby you well interfaced the landscape of the country, the digital transformation, and also showing us that learning through micro-credentials, it has to be accessible learning, and also that we have to even move into the space of mobile technology. UCL app is coming soon. Can we clap hands for Dr. Chetty? Fifthly, Ms. Jessica Nell, thank you for the engaging presentation. Also for highlighting the issue of quality assuring of our micro-credentials and value to who. That was the question. We have noted it and we'll make sure they always remain value to the student. And also, among other issues you touched on, you spoke on personal branding in the digital space. Sincerely, thank you so much, Ms. Nell. Can we give her a warm applause, please? Sixthly, we also would like to thank comments from industry, from stakeholders. Comments, questions we got from the floor, Mr. Mariba, City of Tshwane, and anyone that I might not mention by name, please, thank you so much. My dear sister, comments from the NPOs, and also that you reminded us we are in the TikTok times, and where things move with high speed. And so we'd like to say sincerely thank you for the comments from our guests, from stakeholders, from industry. Please, let's give them a warm applause. Seventhly, Ms. Notala and Ms. Mubu for facilitating the microphones on the floor. It's not a trivial work. You made it possible for the people online to hear the comments because you moved in the floor holding the microphones. You made it digitally audible, digitally exciting to have been here. Can we clap hands for our two beloved sisters? Eighthly, Mr. Teboho Suping in absentia, who did the design of the advert and the program that you have. The clicks you could do digitally online to register the forms and the digital agility of UCL. Thank you in absentia, Mr. Teboho Suping. Can we clap hands for him in absentia? Ninthly, Ms. Taki and UNISA team. You just brought, I don't know whether you brought DSTV or you brought SABC or you just made everything live. We just went digital. I think the way the whole event went, I think we have set a huge standard for UNISA events. And our VP in absentia and the VC, I'm sure they would like to hear feedback after how the event went. So, Ms. Taki and the UNISA team, we had, when you walk in, you could just scan your phone. It has the QR that you had booked, the digital form, the holding screen, the advert of the event, the video we saw on WhatsApps, the digital setup, going live. All was made interactively possible. The online and the physical event were all connected in current time. Can we clap hands for Ms. Taki and the UNISA team for the excellent work? Thank you so much. 10th, Dr. James, you led the program very well. You made the program come alive in substance, in depth, in direction, in focus, and in good pace. Can we clap hands once again to thank Dr. James? 11th is to thank the marketing teams. There is a marketing team from UCL. Now the colleges are starting to see the differences. The marketing team from UCL is more people from UCL. We've got also business developers from UCL. They were listening to all the opportunities. They are now going to go out to all the different areas to now start working on developing those micro-credentials. Marketing team from UCL, marketing teams from colleges. They worked with marketing officers from colleges and also marketing teams from regions. Within 2 weeks, all this was made possible. So UCL, and also, by the way, we're live on Webinar Jam, we're live on Twitter, those who are on social media. The event was also being followed on Twitter and also on LinkedIn and on YouTube. Can we clap hands for the UCL marketing team? Mr. Pora, we made you have sleepless nights. Now your Christmas season will start after tomorrow. He says it starts after from lunchtime. Indeed, indeed. Last, number 12, is to thank all the staff and anyone that I might not have mentioned by name, who organized the tables, the tablecloth, the flowers, the folders, registration desks, refreshments, the meals you are going to have. In the morning we got you on arrival, you're now going to have well-organized lunch. Oh yes, the finance team from UCL for paying and financing everything. And so let's clap hands to thank them all. But the most important thing, I'm going to ask the last one, is to ask all of us to stand up. May we all stand up. May we all stand up. I said it in the beginning, you all made the event a success. Without you, the university is irrelevant. Without you, the micro-credentials will not be possible. Without you, we will miss the mark. You all made the event a huge success. So it's to give yourself a standing ovation.
You deserve it. Thank you so much, Prof. Mohashwa. What a beautiful program. And we have all that we need now to start the work. We have the friendships and the partnerships, and we can move forward because we have each other to do so. Please, friends, make use of the time to network with each other and get each other's contact details, find the people that you want to further the discussion with, communicate with UCL your needs, and also remember you are free to keep the conversation with UCL. Now, as Prof indicated, we have a scrumptious lunch prepared for all of you. And for those who are our online participants, you feel free to raid your home fridges and enjoy a good lunch. You've deserved it. And so, friends, let's head over to the catering stations, and in this time, do connect with each other and keep the conversation going. Enjoy your vacation, safe travels wherever you may be heading to. May you stay safe and in good health, and God richly bless all of you. Thank you and goodbye.